Before I start the show, I'm so stoked to announce that Burton has reached out to continue their FNRad support with add-on goggles and helmets. Hell yeah, I couldn't be more proud to be aligned with the biggest name in snowboarding. Season 10 is presented by Flojoy Water, Chris Roach's family business. Refresh your style with Flojoy Artesian Mountain Water. Pure water, pure stoke. And essential toothpaste tabs, earth-friendly, adventure-ready toothpaste, clean ingredients, supported by science. Wired Snowboards factory in Vancouver builds high-quality custom snowboards for about the same price as other brands' regular boards. I've created several one-of-a-kind wired customs, including a Chase 162 that's seen hundreds of my best powder days. Get yourself a game-changing snowboard and join the Wired team with Devin Walsh, Sasha Daly, and many others. Wired Snowboards. For more information, go to wiredsnowboards.com. Fixed bindings are my go-to for all my snowboards because they're comfortable, durable, and look rad. Fix makes bindings I want to ride. Simple, lightweight, and dependable, made from the best materials, using the most environmentally friendly production processes possible. They offer lifetime warranty on bases and buckles. If you're looking for affordable performance bindings in the perfect color to match your fit, go to fixbindingco.com or grab them at your local retailer. Bluebird Coffee Tuning and Rentals in Squamish is the coolest new stop on your way to Whistler. Bluebird offers quality board tunes using state-of-the-art equipment, premium rentals for every level of rider with demos of Burton step-ons, and award-winning coffee and incredible smoothies. For a blend of expert knowledge, convenience, and lots of charm, stop by Bluebird in Squamish and get your board tuned at the newest mandatory stop on your way to Whistler. Pro Standard makes the grill mount the best mount for your Insta360 GoPro or DJI camera. It's a heat moldable mouth mount, tripod, hand grip, hook mount, bottle mount, wall mount, clamp mount, glove mount, and shoe mount, designed by snowboard legend Ken Ochenbach to get you the perfect angle for snowboarding, surfing, biking, and it'll replace 90% of your other mounts. Use code FNRad to get 20 off your first order at prostandard.com. Anon snow goggles enhance and protect your vision with unmatched optical clarity. Anon's magna-traction quick lens change technology allows you to swap lenses with ease. All Anon goggles are engineered to deliver no fog days and pair perfectly with Anon helmets and MFI magnetic face masks. Get yourself the best goggles at an authorized Anon dealer near you. Support also comes from our friends at the Boardroom Snowboard Shop. Check out boardroomshop.com and use code FNRAD10 for 10% off regular priced items and FNRAD5 for 5% off sale items. 1910, the collaborative artworks of Jamie Lynn and Scof. FNRAD20 saves you 20% off at 1910.com. New Greens, the superfood green drink sourced from American farms. Use code FNRAD for 20% off at newgreens.com. I want to thank DeKind Snowboard outerwear, travel bags, and backpacks, Rip Curl's Anti-Series outerwear, and our friends at Mount Seymour, Grouse Mountain, and Cypress Mountain for their support. Mike Olson is as big a snowboard legend as you can get, and this is an epic episode that I'm dividing into two parts. Mike started building snowboards in 1977. In 1984, he started GNU with Pete Sari, and by 1990, after an aggressive takeover of GNU by Windline, the pair created Liberace Technologies, claiming the lightest boards on the planet. Mike revolutionized board manufacturing and design by partnering with some incredible people collectively known as Mervin Manufacturing, whose headquarters is pretty close to Canada. Sidecut, magna-traction, banana tech, C2 rocker, torsion box construction, cap boards, P-Tech sidewalls, tri-axial fiberglass weaves. Mike Olson has been quietly tinkering away making boards without ski companies for nearly 40 years. It was a great honor to track him down at work and record for a record 8 hours and barely scratch the surface. I'm going to put the entire audio up on our Patreon for free in the next week or two. But for now, enjoy this short 2.5 hour chat with the mythical snowboard builder, Mike Olson.
Yeah, the real name is this. I said, oh yeah, this side. The real spelling is En is Norwegian, and my real name was Bachneberg. That when they came over, they're all Bachnebergs. But the boat that hit New York, as soon as the boat hit New York, they told everybody, all the Norwegians on it, they're like, you're all Olsens. The whole boat. You know, it might have been Swedes and Norwegians. They just called everything. They said, you're all Olsens, because all the other names were too hard to pronounce, you know. So apparently that's what they did.
What's the first thing you stand sideways on, and what era is it?
Is it started out?
Yeah. Let's talk about, is it a skateboard or a surfboard, or are you? Yeah, no, so the very first thing I stood sideways on, I just thought of something I don't think I've ever told anyone. To be honest, the first thing I ever stood sideways on was linoleum. Like, I had this friend named Jim Cloutier. I moved to Burton, which is right by SeaTac Airport in, it was, I think, 1973 or 74. We lived on a really steep concrete hill. And when it rained, it's Seattle, obviously, so it rains a lot. And him and some of the other neighbor guys, he was my age. I was in 4th grade when I first moved there. And then probably happened when I was in 5th grade. So yeah, like 74, I would guess. They would go to Logan Lumber and buy scraps of linoleum, and you stand on them sideways like a surfboard or a skateboard, and slide like a little film of water on the concrete. They would slide insane down the hill. You had no control, but we kind of tried to turn them. They didn't really turn, but you could spin, and almost like skimboarding. Yeah, you could go from the top of the hill to the bottom. And what would ruin your day is you'd wear through the linoleum, the shiny part, and you'd start hitting the rough inner layer of that, whatever that laminate was. It was like 3 layers, you know. So that was the first thing I did. But to be honest, the skateboard, the fad skateboarding hit in like 75, 76, mainly 76. And into 77, I really wanted a skateboard. Everybody had a skateboard. Like everywhere, skateboards were for sale. 7-Elevens had a little kiosk by the Slurpee machine, like right at the front, that sold skateboards. Those little plastic penny boards, they call them.
They looked like penny boards. Yeah, they looked like, but Makaha was big, and GTs were big, and
I have a GT.
Yeah,
I have a blue GT. I got it at a
garage
sale.
GTs and Makahas were 2 of the big brands that you'd see. But and they had urethane wheels. Yeah, that's what changed everything. Obviously, they still had loose ball bearings. A lot of them had loose ones, or they'd call them like they were partially contained. I forget, but they looked like loose balls, but they wouldn't all fall out. But anyway, I didn't have one of those. Every other kid I knew had one, and this is probably what made me so driven to do what I did, start building things. So the trend died. By the time I got to 7th grade, the fad part of it died. Everybody had one. My brother and I were about the only kids that didn't. My mom was like, well, those are dangerous. The ironic thing about it, my brother was 2 years older, and he was a daredevil. Like, he was like, the 2 of us did dangerous things. And my dad, he was the same, right? He was the gnarliest dude I knew. He was a cliff diver, and he used to go up to Canada, up to Desolation Sound, and he'd dive like 75-foot cliffs. I've never seen him jump a cliff ever. He dives. He's like, I know he's gone like 80 plus, maybe 90, but I remember the one we'd always do was like 75 up there. And so I had a dad that was like, he spent almost 8 years in Sun Valley ski bumming in the 50s. He was like, skiing was his life. But my mom was the one that was like, it was really because she liked us. She was a good mom, and but she was one of those people that didn't want to see us get hurt. And so she's like, oh, I don't want you guys skateboarding. I just wanted to play hockey too. All I wanted to be was a professional hockey player. And she was like, that's too dangerous. Like, I raised the money, did everything, weeded lawns and everything I could to get my hockey equipment. And same thing. So now skateboarding came along, and she wouldn't let me get a skateboard. And so me and my brother, I remember we went to a dinner one night about an hour away at a friend's house, an acquaintance of my parents, and there was the daughter was my age, and she had a Makaha skateboard. in her basement. I remember she's like, "Hey, you want a skateboard?" And my brother and I were like, "Really?" Like, and so we learned. We'd never ridden a skate. We learned on her driveway, and took it down the driveway past where she would usually stop, down the down the neighborhood street. We were doing these long like ski runs on them, going, "This is insane! Like, it feels better than it looks." And so I was obsessed with skateboards. And so, but I could never have one. So in 7th grade, now all of a sudden you're a 7th grader, you feel almost like an adult. I still couldn't have a skateboard. And she tightened the clamps down on me, and I would sneak away whatever I could to my friend John Heine. His neighbors had skateboards, so we'd sneak. I'd spend the night at his house and we'd ride skateboards. And I almost bought one at St. Vincent de Paul thrift shop that I saw for $1.99 because skateboarding was starting to die.
Yeah.
Brought my money to school. I was going to hide it behind my house. And the day I went to get it after school, it was sold. And so finally, right when skating was basically dead on the way out, like, so it'd be in 77 where the fad was dying.
Yeah.
The guys that were into it, but the fad was dying. Like people used to all carry their skates to school. Now only a few guys that were hardcore skaters still had a skate. Finally, my mom said, "Okay, you can do it." And so my dad marched us down to JCPenney's, South Center by SeaTac Airport. And there were 2 skates left, 2 closeout skates left. And they were $9.99. I still have it to this day.
Oh, wow.
Me and John Heine and I each got a skateboard. And they were unbranded, really cool though. They had to swirl. They injected it from the middle so it swirled out like hippie colors. We each had these hippie color skates, but they came with ACS 430 trucks, which is a real brand, which most skates didn't have a real brand truck, a cheap skate like that. And then they had, they're called universal grabber wheels. And they had the balls that looked like loose balls, but I took it apart. They weren't loose, they were contained. So it was pretty good for $9.99, but it was a rainy day. And I remember John Heine and I just skating all Saturday, in my basement, cleared out all the furniture and just on the little linoleum floor, just tic-tac. We worked on tic-tacs and got it down, and then went out in the rain and took our tic-tacking to the street, sliding out, and started riding hills. And he was my ski buddy and my longtime buddy. I met him in 4th grade, and we were now 7th graders. We were besties. So we just started skating a bunch, and that was in the winter, and skating was dying. By that spring, I was addicted. I was buying the magazines, and there was a couple guys at our junior high. I was in 7th grade. There was 3 guys that were a year older that still kept skating. And it was a guy named Bruce Fogg, a guy named John Derrickson. Bruce Fogg wore I don't remember which jersey he wore, but John Derrickson wore a Sims competition jersey, the red, white, and blue one.
Oh, damn.
And then Peter Fewing wore a GNS yellow jersey. And they'd come skating in the parking lot every morning. Like, they could do handstands. A couple of them could tic-tac on their hands. I mean, they were insane. And the funny thing now, I'm telling the story, but Peter Fewing, where did he go after? He's in the Northwest, one of the most renowned soccer guys ever. He ended up starting some of the first soccer camps ever, and I know he's been a color commentator for the Sounders, and he coaches for Seattle U, and he took them to the national championship and won it, and da-da-da. Anyway, it's pretty rad. And Bruce Fogg ended up being one of the first punk rock bands in the area called the Rejectors, and he was my buddy, and we kind of got the idea going together. But then he took it and went somewhere with it. And I just looked up history of Northwest punk rock recently, and some foundation calls them the #2 punk rock band in Northwest, and said Kurt Cobain used to come out from Aberdeen to watch them, and all these guys that are big names, from the grunge era. They were younger than us, so they were all coming to see Bruce Fogg and the Rejectors. None of their songs were longer than 45 seconds at the time. It was that was the rule. Anyway, that. And then John Derrickson, he was such a good skater, and he ended up, turns out his mom lived in Burien, his dad was Canadian, I think lived somewhere near Calgary. He would disappear now and then from school visiting his dad, and he came back once by the time we were in high school. By then they're my skate buddies. What happened to him? Everyone said, "Hey, he won a bull riding contest. He's #1 bull rider in North America." And I was like, do they even, it is like in the late 80s or early 80s when skateboarding was dead. I'm like, are there bulls still? And they're like, no, bull riding. Like, turns out his secret life was he was riding bulls and with his dad. His dad was a Calgary, like, you know, like, I was like, whoa, John, we didn't even know that about John. But anyway, snap back to 77. I convinced my mom. My dad helped me convince my mom because he was into it. But I was like, listen, can I build a skateboard? And I said, I'm going to build it out of wood. It's like good for me to learn these skills. I'm not going to put trucks and wheels on it. I just, you know, put it on the wall or something. My dad helped convince, you know, he's not going to put trucks and wheels on it. It's good for him to, and he knew, like, wink, wink, nod, nod. And he found a guy he knew that had a bandsaw. And anyway, back then, Logan Erskies and Sims and G&S were three of the big brands of real wood boards, right? Three of the most prominent ones. I was a fan of Sims. But at the time, Bonsai, there was aluminum boards called Bonsais that had a kick nose. First board I know of to have a kick nose. Nothing had a kick nose at that time.
Right.
And my neighbor around the street that was 2 years older named Bob Neal rode a Bonsai. He wasn't really part of the pack of three ripping skaters that were a year older than me. He was 2 years older. He's my brother's age. He could do tic-tacs on his hands. And him and I built a quarter pipe at his house. He could do kick turns like a few feet up the quarter pipe on his hands.
Jeez.
And so this guy, anyway, I just remember watching him and like, whoa, I got to build a wood board that looks like a Logan Erskine, but has a kick nose, like a bonsai and shaped like a bonsai. Wow. So that's what I built. And I think I might have it in my office, but I have it under my house if I don't have it in the office. But anyway, once I got it finished, he put lots of coats of finish on it. I put a nice kick nose, kick tail on it. It looked like a Logan Erskine, but I put Sim stickers on it.
How did you do the kick nose and tail?
I cut
out with
the bandsaw. Cut the wood off the bottom like at a 45, and then glued that to the top. So it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I looked at the magazine pictures of close-ups. I could kind of see how you do that. And we went to this old man's house, and the old man did the cut for me. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's like, "Oh no, you can't touch the bandsaw." So he did the cuts, and
Sweet. I
did a lot of sanding. Yeah. I remember I put Kleenex with rubber bands over my face because I realized real quick that dust gets in your nose. And
so bad.
That's when I learned masks are a good thing. I made my own mask. But anyway, when I finished the board, and then my dad had to help me. Like, come on, Helen, let him put trucks and wheels on it. So I eventually got convinced her to order trucks and wheels. So in the magazine, I went to the cheapest ad there was. It was a company called Ample. It stood for American Pultruded Products. They would make fiberglass boards by pultruding them. I didn't know that back then. I know it now because I finally figured it out. But that's why they're called Ample. But it was like, Ample is best for less was like their ad. Everything was cheap.
Yeah.
So it had no-name wheels, probably factory seconds. The red urethane wheels, like good ones. And they had ACS 500 trucks really cheap. They had Bennett trucks, I think. They had a lot of the name band trucks. But ACS 500s. So I looked at the pictures, got these trucks and wheels. The wheels I got, I tried to measure, with my little tape measure, like what size do I think is a real wheel, a good wheel? Everything came in when it came in. Of course, it was supposed to come in a week, and it came in like a month. Like I checked the mailbox every day after school. The wheels were really wide and narrow and low, and the trucks were the highest trucks on earth, which is probably why they've been closed out. They're narrow and tall.
Yeah, that's why they're cheap.
Yeah,
you got the wheels
I had
ones with the
dumbest
trucks
looking.
Ones. Yeah,
my skate was pretty cool, but everything underneath it was horrible, and the wheels were loud. All the Bruce Fogg and John Derrickson, Peter Fewing, they were all riding like Road Rider 4s. Everyone was riding or Sims comps. Yeah. Right, that were red and soft, probably 80. I think back then they were even like 82 drum or 85 drum, and they're really, really soft, and maybe 80s even. What am I thinking? They might have been 78s.
Serious.
But these that I got, by today's standards, they're probably 90s. They were, which is soft by today's standards, but they were loud. They weren't quiet like those guys.
You could power slide them and stuff. If that was
anyway, I started skating to school every day. And it was just me, and I'd see those guys now and then. Like I was an underclassman, but I was like, hey, I was like the kid compared to them. But it was just them and me pretty much that still skated at the school. And I didn't really get to know them until high school. I think they probably didn't pay any attention to me. But I just, I'd skate to school and put the skate in my locker. And
Was there slalom competitions and stuff at that point, or was it all this freestyle stuff?
No, I think there really. I think for sure there were, because I ended up going to John Heine and I went to the what was like Skatopia or so, I forget what it was called. It wasn't Skatopia. I forget what it was called, but a group from California came up and they rented next to the Coliseum the I forget what it was called. Anyway, it's the right in Seattle Center. It's the gym that's smaller, slightly smaller. Seattle Thunderbirds used to play there, but they brought up this whole group of skaters, and so it was like they filled the stadium. So this was still in '77 when the sport was dying, but they still had enough diehards. And I remember going there. They had a couple quarter pipes, but they had a ramp with a slalom course going down it. And I just remember, what was the guy's name? A guy from Colorado won the race. Bobby Piercy, guy that stood ski stance. Do you know who that is?
I do know who Bobby Piercy is.
Yeah, I think he might not be alive now. I think there's a story. I'm not positive, but
I don't.
You know who I'm talking about?
I do know who you're talking about.
Because Henry Hester obviously came to work for us later, and he was a big. He always competed against Bobby.
So
Piercy.
Something that I've learned from going through and doing the history, because of George Pappas is from Boulder.
Yeah.
That the reason there was such a rad Colorado scene was that Kryptonics was actually a wheel company for mining carts.
Right.
And so then the son of the Kryptonics guy was like, Dad, can we make these skate wheels? And because of Kryptonics, those Colorado guys like Bobby Piercy, somebody did a thing called like roadside attraction.
Right.
And it was a yearly series of skateboarding, downhill slalom, and then by the end there was freestyle events. And these guys had to come out from California, and they couldn't beat the Colorado guys.
No.
Like the Colorado guys.
Yeah, because it was, what was it? I can't remember if John Hudson was from there too, or Hudson and Piercy maybe, but
Hudson and Piercy.
But Piercy was strictly ski style. I mean, he was like, and his knees were like whipping like he's on moguls.
Right.
And I think Henry Hester was probably up at this thing too. I think it was all the best.
Hester came in, he got like third or fourth.
I think all of them were in Seattle. I think they were all there.
Yeah.
And I remember just freaking out, just seeing Bobby Piercy live, and I think Henry was at that one. I think they're all at that one. And probably Bob Skolberg too, which is fun because I know him now.
Oh, wow.
Bob Skolberg and Henry introduced me to Bob Skolberg. But anyway, and then I just remember they had two big quarter pipes and put on a demonstration of that. Right. I don't think it was a competition, but that part was a demonstration. And a guy that I'd never seen in the magazine at that point, but he made the magazines after that. His name was Chris Stropel. I remember we were just like, the announcer was like, whoa, we got the young kid Chris Stropel here from maybe San Diego or where, but I just remember like he blew everyone away. And we saw that, and I immediately built a quarter pipe. I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be like Chris Stropel.
Yeah. So your first wave freestyle skateboarding, which I think they called all that stuff freestyle. Like
it was freestyle.
The ramp and all the
because the main, and everything. Of course, they did 360s and they did Daffys, tons of Daffy 360s. And I think Ellen Berryman was there, and Laura Thornhill, and all of them. Ellen O'Neill, and
wow. I've talked to Ellen O'Neill.
Yeah.
Because George Pappas told me this story about he got scoped by a talent scout. Yeah. That in Boulder. Yeah. Which I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Right. It was like a guy who was a wide world of sports promoter. Yeah. He handpicked Pappas from the Boulder scene. Sent him down to like Caracas or somewhere for a demo with like the people that you just mentioned. So I called, I think Ellen O'Neill. I can't remember which one.
Ellen O'Neill, Ellen Berryman, and
one of them has passed now.
Yeah, I know Laura Thornhill came up here a few years ago.
Oh wow!
Ellen Berryman, Ellen O'Neill, and Laura Thornhill came up with Henry.
Oh wow!
And they were dating for a while.
Yeah, so I said, "Hey, do you remember?"
This is recently. He came up.
That's insane.
And she's doing her and Henry. She really she like pepped Henry up. Like basically, once he started hanging out with her, he's like in super good shape now, and like she still skates. She's still like and he was just so happy. We went to lunch together, and
dope.
And anyway, she went to the my wife and I, and the two of them went to lunch here in Port Angeles. And when she went to the bathroom, he's like, I feel like the luckiest guy on earth. I'm with Laura Thornhill.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah.
But you could just see the pep in his step. He was like doing great. He was
she was a celebrity. I mean, we're talking about like when skateboarding blew up. There were like the Coke commercials, Burger King commercials with people skateboarding. It was on TV shows. Farrah Fawcett.
Like that's one of the things that
Charlie's Angels,
I'll never forget. You know. Yeah. Like it was a great time, and so luckily I then convinced my mom. Once I was over that hump, I was like, shortly after I built that first skate, it was like, that was like in the early spring of my 7th grade school year. Within a couple of months of that skate, I was like, I'm going to build another skate. And my dad took me up to the lumber store, and this time I made it like a GNS warp tail. I used a piece of solid birch and solid maple. I thought, I'll try both.
Yeah.
Right? Which is better? I don't know. Back then, skates, 7-ply maple wasn't a thing. They existed, but they weren't really a thing. There was a few obscure brands trying that, you know, but the really cool skates were the solid oak and the GNS warp tails, you know, that I think they were made of ash, if I remember right. And they actually warped them. But I thought, I'll take 2 pieces of wood, build a little jig, and try to bend the tail. And it kind of worked. I soaked the wood in water, thinking that would do something. It just warped it. So it was warped, not the tail.
Yeah, twisted.
But anyway, that skate was way better than the first one. It was thin, and it was like, it was cool. I put wheel wells in it, and it didn't have a kick nose, but then I got some I got some, I'm trying to remember what trucks I had for that. I actually got some good trucks. I got some better trucks. They might have been Bennett's on that one. I think I finally forked out and got real Bennett's. Got some real wheels. Got some Sim Snakes.
Oof,
and they were green. They were like beautiful. There was an ad with Tom Inouye, I believe, and Doug D. Montmorency, who I heard moved to Oregon. I've heard he's an Oregon guy, but he was my favorite skater. Sims guys were my favorite guys. So I like Doug D. Montmorency and Tom Inouye. It's ironic. You've probably met Tom lately, right? Tom's in the snowboard scene.
Yeah.
We were sponsoring his daughter a while back. Yeah. And but we would always give Tom boards. But those were my favorite 2 skaters. Both Sims guys that wore the Sims competition jerseys. But they were marketing in a skate park. I don't remember which park it was, but one with rolled vert, but with like rolled tops, no coping, and they're on the snakes. And I was like, I got to get snakes. And so, anyway, we had a skate shop in Burton. Like I said, skating was dying on the, as a fad. Yeah. But the people that were into it. So in Little Burton, our little town of Burton next to SeaTac, there was 5 places you could buy skateboards. Five. It's a small little village town, right? Yeah. But there was there's a place called Roll Your Own Skateboards, which is a skateboard shop. There was Sea and Ski. Sea and Ski was a ski shop, boat shop that had a big glass counter. You'd walk in and it's all boats and ski equipment and motorcycles, but you'd smell the grip tape and the urethane.
Yeah.
What's now Big 5 Sports, it was called Sports West. The building it was in had a counter and sold skateboards. They sold a local brand called Torque. Highline Cycle had a skate department, and then there's one more. I think Pan Pack had them, but there was multiple skate shops.
And so you become the ramp guy, like you have these quarter pipes, and you.
So all of a sudden, I built a quarter pipe at my house. So I went to a place called Vulture Lumber that was like an hour away. I found it in the yellow pages. It said used lumber, and it was it was discarded Boeing lumber. So we had a sedan, an old Ford LTD. We strapped it to the racks. These racks. We used them for ski racks, but they weren't ski racks. But we strapped this wood with nails on it, and anyway, and I had neighbors across the street. Got that wrong. That's my first good ramp. My first ramp, my neighbors across the street, it was two guys, Dick and Ridge. They were married, and they had, which at the time, pictures of the 70s, we were like,
big deal.
And to me, it was just, I knew them. So I was like, I just remember other neighbors what? Those 2 guys? Everyone would say, well, they're just good friends. But I used to do work for them. They raised Persian cats for cat shows, like the cats with the funny little flat faces.
Cool.
And so I'd go do work for them all the time. They loved having the young dude in there, and they were really nice. They were the nicest guys on earth. Of
course.
And they gave me the first wood for my first ramp because other neighbors would complain, like, "What are you doing? you're in 7th grade now. You shouldn't be doing kid things. And they were the ones like, hey, that's cool what you're doing. So they donated wood. My first ramp was a Persian cat victory stand. Like it was shaped. The wood was shaped like, so it had like first, second, third place tiers.
No way.
So they gave me and it was only like, I think it was 4 or 5 feet wide, 2 pieces of wood that were painted white already because they tore apart a victory stand, let me have the wood. So my first ramp kind of went kink, and it didn't go to vert, but you'd go as high as you could up. It was wobbly at the top. You got narrow at the top, so you'd try to do one wheelers or just get 2 wheels over the top.
Of course.
But that was thanks to Dick and Ridge.
Oh, that's sweet.
They were the nicest guys on earth. And that was paid well too. Other neighbors, if I did work, they're like, it was like Napoleon Dynamite. I seem to forget my money, but I got a little change. These guys were like, here's $5.
Which is an insane amount of money.
It was insane.
They
were nicest guys on earth. My next one, I got the wood from Vulture Lumber. I went, I got to do it right. Not a ramp that goes kink, kink. My next one, I think by then I was in 8th grade. The next year, I'd cut out trannies. And I mean, it was good. It was like probably a I'm going to go with a 7-foot radius transition at the bottom, elliptical into. Jeez. I pulled something tight, so it was only 6 foot high, but it was vert. True vert. True vert.
7 is tight, but then the kink is even tighter.
Yeah, my theory was even then was like, okay, as you're losing speed at the top, you can tighten it. Yeah. I still to this day believe I really love elliptical tranny where it gets tighter at the top because the higher you go, the slower you're going, so you can tighten it up a little and make it vert quicker. It makes good ramps for airs. And so I'm skating alone at that point. I really hadn't hooked up with those 3 skaters, like I was talking about, John.
Yeah.
And
you're doing
John Bruce
your first skateboard ramp.
So now I'm learning. My brother did it with me when we still had the kitty.
Yeah,
the kitty
kink.
The kitty, and he broke his arm. He broke his arm, had to go to the hospital and get a plate in it. So that
was
the end of his skateboarding.
That's it. That's usually what happens.
And he's 2 years older. He was best guitar player on earth. So from that point on, he became a rock star. He was like
rad.
He's the guy. Bands weren't common back then.
Yeah,
like now everybody's in a band. Then, like if a high school had one band, that was a big deal.
Yeah,
his guys, him and his buds were so good that they had an agent. By the time they're in 9th grade, they're doing gigs at other schools and
a high school band.
Yeah.
And
we had a local band here when we moved out here called 90 Pound Wuss.
Yeah.
And I was camping here when we first built this building, and they all showed up one day. We had a little quarter pipe or a little half pipe that we inherited that someone was giving away. And anyway, I think they're called 90 Pound Wuss. All these guys, I woke up one morning, I was sleeping in my VW van, and they were all sleeping in their cars. And they're like, we're a punk rock band. We're a Christian punk rock band called 90 Pound Wuss. Anyway, I've never heard them play, but I was in San Francisco like 10 years later at a little boutique record store on Haight Street, and there was a whole stack of like they were promoting like 90 Pound Wuss, and I was like, whoa, they must have been pretty good.
So fucking rad. Yeah. But, so I'm trying to imagine you as a grade 7, grade 8, like 13, 14-year-old kid. Obviously, you go eventually to school on a math scholarship. So you're like, are you a bit nerdy, or are you like you're
probably And
you're academically...
Okay, so here's the so I'm for sure on the spectrum, and I talk now. I talk because I know my subject. Right with this, I feel comfortable with this.
Yeah, this is incredible.
This whole snowboard thing gave me comfort, and punk rock gave me comfort.
Cool.
Punk rock saved me.
Yeah,
but. When I went back to my reunions, like my 10-year reunion, my 20-year reunion, 30-year reunion, high school reunions, people go, oh, you talk now. And I'm like, what? I go, was I really that bad? They're like, you didn't really say anything.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. And I talked a little. I know, but I didn't talk much. I was shy. I grew up on Whidbey Island, and my mom, we went to a general practitioner in Everett when I was like probably in kindergarten or first grade. And I remember he assigned to my mom, like, take Michael, send him to the neighbors to get sugar or eggs or something, because they were, I wouldn't talk to people. Like, get him.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I was like, no, we were driving home. Like, please don't do it, Mom. And she didn't make me do it. She was like, I cried. I was like, don't make me go to the neighbor and ask for sugar.
So they're trying to break you of shyness.
Yeah. And I was really shy. I moved to Everett then, and I was really shy. And my mom would comb my brother and my hair with VO5 and then Dennis the Menace it. Mm-hmm. It was rock hard on the front. I just remember, and you could dig out the soft part underneath, and other kids would go tap, tap, tap on our hair. And what changed my whole life is when I moved to Burien, I moved to Burton, got a fresh start in 4th grade, and my mom just started to comb my hair, and it was my first day of 4th grade, and I was coming at the end of the year, and I went, "No, Mom, I'm combing my hair today." I wanted to make it look like Bobby Brady from the Brady Bunch. I took a brush and went straight down, like, and I remember I wore I bought a Bobby Brady like a groovy shirt, you know, it's kind of groovy with all these different color blocks on it, and I was like, "No, Mom, I'm gonna have my own look now." And I remember going to school going, "I'm not gonna be shy." But apparently I was, because I learned that in my reunions. But the first day of school, I remember, like, when kids asked me questions, I was like, "I'm going to talk." And
that's dope. That's dope. Well, the thing about that is that's one of the biggest blunders we made as a culture, as a community. Canada, the States, Western, is that we don't celebrate introverts at all.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, this guy's going to be the top dog. He's got to be a Donald Trump, man of the people. But when you talk about, like, and here we are in this room with surrounded by things that you've invented on your own or with other people. We needed these things. And we didn't need you to talk about them. We didn't need you to be a Hal Burton saying that you're doing shit. We needed the doer, which is what you became. And so, and the idea of you not talking to me is insane, because every time we talk, it's just...
And it's probably because I don't know when to quit talking nowadays, because it's one of those things where it's I feel self-conscious inside, and it's one of those things where I'm so used to being back then where I didn't know what to say in a conversation. So now when I have more confidence now, right?
Of course.
And so now it's like I don't know when to stop, because it's like, oh, I actually can say something. I'm not the shy kid that's just going to be hiding. But what really saved me was, so I thought I turned over a new leaf when I combed my hair straight down like Bobby Brady.
I love it.
But once again, my classmates at my reunion say, "Oh no, you were really quiet." But anyway, punk rock helped me a ton, because I got into skating, and Skateboarder magazine was the Bible. So then by 1978, 79, punk rock hit skateboarding. That's when Steve Olsen and Olsen came into being, and Dwayne Peters, and they all like cut their hair, and all of a sudden they're like punk rock. And I remember they'd print top, every month. I had a subscription, and it was like top 10 bands, voted on by skaters. And I'd look, and it was like Devo. It was always like eclectic, right? Like Devo, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Dead Kennedys. And anyway, I'd go like, bingo, I already know Led Zeppelin, and I know Deep Purple because my brother plays that in the basement, and they're good at it, his band.
Sick.
They play cover songs.
Dope.
They're really good at it, and they write their own. But all of a sudden, I went to a record store, and I remember I bought my first 2 records ever. I bought Rush and Devo. And I came home just going, yes, I got Rush Hemispheres, and I got Devo. And then I went to the Devo. I went to, I guess it was their second time, maybe the first time they ever came to Seattle. But it was the Duty Now for the Future concert down at the Showbox in Seattle. John Heine, my buddy, and I, so he kept skating with me. My brother had to quit after he broke his arm, to kind of decide to quit. But, and John eventually tailed off too. I started building skates, and probably my little crazy eclectic Asperger-y thing, I just dove into this own world of studying the magazines. And there was a few East Coast skate magazines back then. I bought every skate magazine you could get your hands on and just studied skate. But to kids nowadays, they don't understand there's no internet, right? So that's what you got, the Bible.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I'm buying Devo and
do you find like community in this right away? Punk rock community and the skateboard community and all that?
Bruce Fogg, I get up to high school then, and Bruce Fogg, actually, now that I think about it, junior high, a turning point. And this is an important part of the story, so important to my story, a story most people don't know. And it goes crazy a little bit here. What's going to happen is going to sound like a movie, but this must be, I guess this must still be 7th grade, end of 7th grade, very end. I see a guy with a skate shirt on that's not one of those 3 guys. He's a 9th grader. I'm a 7th grader, and he's crossing the street at the end, a big highway. It's basically the main highway that runs right through Burton, and I'm crossing to one side, and he's going down the other side to Normandy Park, where the wealthier kids lived, and he's got a skate shirt on. I don't remember what it was. It might have been a Dogtown or it might have been a Zephyr shirt. But I was like, whoa, he's older than me. He's bigger than me. And I go, are you a skater? And he's like, well, yeah, he's the nicest guy on earth. And I'm trying to remember his name, but he had a half pipe in his backyard. He had a full, like, no flat bottom. Flat bottom didn't exist. It was built like in the trees. Like it was the full, like, I think it was 12 feet high by 8 feet wide. That's the way they built them back then, like a rad ramp.
Yeah.
But his name was Randy. His name was Randy something. And anyway, he, over the next few years, he lets me come skate his ramp anytime I want. And you get dizzy when you're on a ramp with no... I listened to a Stacy Peralta interview recently where he says that's what changed skating, flat bottom. It's what changed all side stance sports, flat bottom, right? You get double pumps.
Yeah.
But this was the opposite. But he where the story is crazy, he introduces me to a guy my age that goes to a private school, a Catholic school named Doug Zakowski. And Doug, it turns out me and Doug are the same age, but so important. This story needs to be heard. There's so many stories. I'm glad you're here that need to be heard. My wife always tells me, like, you need to start writing a book because there's so many stories that they don't come out though unless someone like you's asking questions. Yeah. Right? I won't crack this till we're on screen. Flojoy. Ooh, it's nice logo. Yeah, I know Megan and DCP and we spent a lot of time with them in Costa Rica over the years. And yeah, like Megan, of course, Barrett Christie's best friends with Megan, right? And we used to spend a ton of time like surfing together, just hanging out in Costa Rica. So it's funny. I had my secret life of, disappear now and then in the winter for a little bit for like a couple of weeks over Christmas break or whatever. And a lot of times they would be down there or in the summer. And so I had my little world where I'm, the Mervin guy up here, and then down there, I'm like, I'm getting to be really good friends with the Yes crew. And we knew Megan from Barrett over the years, but I really got to have fun surfing with DCP, having sessions with him. And super nice guy. And his kids, it's just fun. I just watching the kids grow up from being born basically to where they are now to Lily and.
Oh yeah, and they rip, and they sometimes the kids get the parent style.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Not always. Yeah,
but
right.
These kids both are ripping. JF Pelchat's kids are also ripping.
Yeah, JF too. I know JF too because we all shared time together. Are we filming again? Or
yep.
Okay.
We're back
so I'm just gonna say JF and us. We were all part of the Quiksilver Rozzy thing for a short moment, so we got to spend some time.
Of course, and so people here have mentioned, like I was just talking with some of the guys that've been here forever.
Yeah.
And the Quiksilver time sounds like there was like money, right? Because JF went around with Travis in a bus, and they've hit like every city.
It's kind of a yes and a no. Like so, Quiksilver never. They never, went, hey, here's money for you guys. Pete and I sold, and our partner Randy sold to them basically break even. Basically,
right.
They paid off our debt with the bank, so it was nothing. They paid off $4.2 million in bank debt, and that was basically it. They gave us an earnout, but we missed every one. A 3-year earnout, we missed everything.
Okay, so a 3-year earnout for just
we didn't get a penny off of it.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
This is. If you hit your numbers, you get something.
Yeah, we didn't because the numbers were kind of big.
Right.
They were like, when you guys join up with them.
Because Jamie Salter just did that to Volcom, right?
Yeah.
Like
in this case,
they were hitting their numbers, and now once they haven't, all of a sudden everything changes.
Yeah, we had a third partner, Randy, Randy.
Yeah.
He was all gung-ho going, hey, this is going to be easy. I remember the Quick guys, the CFO of Quick, his name was Steve Brink, and he, I liked him. I thought he was awesome. And anyway, I just remember on the dry erase board, he was putting what the goals are going to be. And I remember thinking, snowboarding's in a downturn. That's why we're selling to Quick. We asked them to buy us. They didn't ask to buy us. We asked them to buy us as a favor. Yeah. Because they wrote, Bob McKnight and Danny Kwok wrote our snowboards, and we had a great relationship.
Rad.
But anyway, Steve Brink put up the goals, and Randy was like, well, this is going to be easy. Like, the two of us combined, it's going to be easy. Well, of course, it didn't change. The fact that we were part of Quick didn't make sales change at all.
No, of course
and so,
not. Right.
So we missed every year. Randy, he was out of the business at that point, but every year he'd come back like, hey, did you hit the goal? And we're like, nope. Like our sales actually went down a little those first few years because one of their guys in Europe, basically fired our whole distribution. And we're like, what? And they're like, this is the way we got to do it. Cutthroat. You'll see.
Right.
It wasn't, the U.S. guys were great, but one of the guys in Europe, I won't mention the name.
Yeah.
He's like, we're going to teach you how to run business. And we're like, but these guys we've spent years developing all these distributors. They're our best friends. Like, he canned almost every one of them. And what happened? They're like, we're going to make your sales go up with our new distributors. Our sales tanked in Europe. In the U.S., we did fine. Yeah, but that made it so we couldn't.
For my friend and former boss Murray Fraser. He got caught in that whole same thing, right? Like
he got cut too. They all did.
Yeah, and he was so bummed about it because he was making money hand over fist.
Yeah,
you guys were supplying incredible boards. He'd come down here and say, like, just take all the cores you've got, all the bases, make us some special makeup boards, and get rid of and write you a check, like say, like, look, we'll pay for them up front so that you've got operating.
And that's what I kind of learned.
He was like, awesome. Right,
we always thought, we don't know anything about business,
right?
And what we've learned after all these years, like, they actually knew more about business than the businessmen.
Yeah,
because they always just play all these games, right? And moving money, like no,
money move around.
It's just simple.
Yeah.
Here's build a great product, and then someone pays you, and you don't overcharge. Pay everyone that works with you and for you, and
don't make too many.
It's really simple.
Of them.
Don't make too many of them.
Is the thing.
That was our thing always.
Yeah.
And we watched the other brands make too many, and it's like no.
From the very beginning, from the Jamie Salter Kemper days, the make too many did the same thing every time. It hurt everybody. All of a sudden, there's $99 Kemper boards in every gas station all over the place.
Yeah, they were at Costco at one point.
Yeah, and I'm like, I bought one. I bought a
Why
Kemper
not?
Aggressor. I was like a 16, 17-year-old kid with a 170 race board just because it had that Kemper base that I wanted.
Yeah,
that I wanted that under my feet.
And it was made by Paulé. It was a good board.
Yeah, actually,
the guys at Paulé did a good job.
Didn't have inserts.
I had the inserts at Paulé. As a matter of fact, funny story, but I started selling or training with Paulé towards the end, even when our relationship quit with Paulé when Kemper came in, because it was I was like, I don't want another competitor in here. Avalanche was in there.
Yeah,
they're great. He's Chris and Beth Sanders,
amazing,
and Damien. They're all I love those guys, and so I was like, perfect. I love being together with those guys.
Yeah,
and but then I was like, wait a second. I met Jamie, and he's like, he's him and I are the same age, and he's like, I made his first appointment ever with Paulé at ISPO, and he said, he came by like 3 days trying to make an appointment, and I was the only one that spoke English, and I kept shooing him away because I kind of knew who he was from the sailboard industry.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, he's going to try to move into this factory. And I was about to sign a deal with Paulé to become one. I had no money, and they were making money because they were starting to grow, but they were just a family-owned business. They lived at the factory. They were small at the time. They ended up being the biggest ski snowboard factory in the world at one point. They passed Rossi. They made over 1 million units one year.
Is that because
they're just so smart?
Snowboarding or because
snowboarding and skiing combined? They're smart. They're the smartest people. His dad and son. It's the Leopold family.
Yeah.
Gerhard Leopold was the son, who's my age exactly, and Paul Leopold, who doesn't speak English. And they're awesome. Paul, the old guy. I knew a little German from high school, so some days it would be me and him alone on Sundays, and I'd speak to him in German. I didn't know much. I'd say the Himmel ist blau, which means the sky is blue, and things like that. But he loved to ski. Yeah. And Gerhard didn't care as much about skiing. He could ski, but so one day Paul Leopold and I went skiing together up Karalpa, the little local hill behind their factory in the village. Just had some T-bars. It was great. It was a great mountain in tree line, which is rare in Europe. And I just remember it was great. We're going up together on T-bars, and we're both speaking our own language, and I'm trying to speak German. I knew a little bit, but we're having fun together. And I was just showing them, like, I was Nording. There was all these rollers. It's a medium, perfect, steep slope, but there's rollers where I was really back then into, this is probably 1987, 88. We'd call it like Glande or Nord jumping on our snowboards, where you'd lift the nose like you're an Olympic ski jumper and just soar just barely off the ground. And I remember him just like, he was like an old ski dude, and he was doing it with me, and it was a great relationship. So
the idea that you and the namesake for Paulé are riding together. Like no one has.
Oh, it's fantastic.
No skateboard company has a founder that was, you know what I mean? Was with
it's fun.
You know, what was his name? The Wiggly Piggly. He's a Canadian guy.
Uncle Wiggly, or there's
no Uncle Wiggly's down San Diego.
Yeah, there's California, but
I
know who you're talking about.
I said his name earlier on.
Is he the guy that came up with some high back bindings too? That I know Jeff Grell did, but there was
no. There's another guy. You're thinking Louis Forno.
Lofo. So I think he may have been the guy that was building the first Kempers.
You're right. He was
because he built the Sims blades. He built the Sims blades. That's what I'm thinking of.
That's right.
You got it. That's the name I was thinking of. Yeah, because I had a guy named Bob Holstrom. Who somehow worked, I think he supplied the cores to them. He's a guy from Duluth, Minnesota.
Wild.
Who sent he's a hockey stick maker. He had a hockey stick company called Ebony Jet. They're all black hockey sticks.
Yep.
And he started making Aspen cores with sidewalls, and he'd send them to Louis, I believe.
That's insane.
And so, but I still have 2 Ebony Jets under my house.
Oh
my God. I have a left hand and a right hand.
That's incredible.
And
so the guy I'm thinking of, his parents were furniture makers.
Okay.
And so he called Tom and said, like, I see what you're doing with your kicktails.
Yeah.
I think we could do that with furniture bending, like the way that we
on
bend
the skates
here. Yeah. So, but then he wound up also getting involved with snowboards.
Okay.
On some level, there was, I think he was Ontario, and then
because I know when Tom was still alive, one of the last times I saw him, he came on a heli trip. We were still part of Quiksilver.
Oh, wow.
He came on a heli trip to Tayax, and I would only go 2 days. Everyone else would go 4 days. We all had to pay our own bills, so at least I did. So I would just drive up from there. Everyone else flew up from California, and I think Pete usually went 4 days with them. I'd only just do 2. I'd just drive up and go, how much is it a day? Like $900 a day? I'll just do 2. Yeah, and so the last one I ever went on, Tom was there. Unreal. I show up like day 1 and day 2, and Tom's there, which I was stoked because you had to know someone. You had to be invited, right? You had to be a quick guy or really close to Bob McKnight and Willie Morris and those guys.
Sure.
I saw Tom was there. I was like, oh, he knows the quick guys. So I get up there and I have breakfast with Tom day 1, and we were on opposite helis, but we'd see each other. I was the same chopper, but we were talking a bunch. We had dinner together, and I realized he was always with me, which I was flattered because I love Tom Sims. Finally, I think it's the second day we're having breakfast, and I go, I'm going home tomorrow. And he's like, what? He turned red. He goes, I realized he's going to present selling Sims to Quick, and I was his connection.
Oh no!
Because I said, well, who else do you know here? And he goes, you. And I go, wait, what? And he goes, I was going to make a proposal to Bob McKnight. I wanted you to
broker the deal.
Yeah. And so anyway, I wasn't. We had a little quick, where I kind of introduced him, got him tighter with McKnight and da.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think that's when Sims was hooked up with Gart Sports. Was almost like a house brand for them. He was trying to separate it out, and he was trying to make it on his own again or something. I'm not quite sure.
Right,
because I left.
Because Salter owned it at
for a while
point too,
yeah,
and was really pounding it into the ground.
But what I got at one point though from him, from one of our lunches or dinners or breakfast, I was like, we had a great relationship, obviously. But I said, hey Tom, I just want to let you know the story about me making skates. That every skateboard I made had Sim stickers on it. I made them look like Sims.
Awesome.
I wanted my first 4 or 5 skates all look like Sims, and I loved your taper kicks. So anyway, I started talking about the taper kicks.
Sweet,
I don't know if you remember the taper kicks, but they had ash, they had walnut, they had maple, they had all these colors of striped wood, and there's ads of Tom hand selecting the wood. It's like Tom Sims hand selecting the wood going into every taper kick. So I told them, I said, hey, that was my favorite ad ever. You're hand selecting the wood, and I go, I made boards that look just like that. And then he goes, oh, I never made one of those. He goes, we actually bought those. He goes, that's just a fake for an ad. And this is where it's fun. He goes, I can't even remember who made those for me. And I go, Taper Flex water skis? Because they're called Sims taper kicks.
Yeah.
I go, Taper Flex water skis? He goes, well, that's it. And I was just laughing. I was laughing that I was telling him, because as a kid, I was in Victoria, BC, and I saw a Taper Flex water ski
and they look
in a
like
general store,
too.
and I went, that looks like a Sims taper kick.
That's unbelievable.
And I'd never seen a taper kick in real life.
How cool is that?
And he goes, that's who it was.
That's so unbelievable.
It was Taper Flex water skis. And then I started talking about Lonnie Toft, and it turns out him and Lonnie Toft had a falling out in the end. I don't know if you know that.
No, but
big time.
I could imagine.
And so he said, I started going, and I met Lonnie Toft's uncle that lives in Washington. And I go, he was my hero. Lonnie Toft, his 8-wheelers and da-da. And then Tom goes, we didn't really get along at the end. Apparently they had a falling out, and I don't know if Lonnie got fired or quit or whatever happened. He said Lonnie had a big bonfire on the beach that Sims drove by or something, and they were burning all the Lonnie Toft models. Lonnie was with all his buddies. But then we started talking about that board, and I go, yeah, so started talking about pressing those. Was it you and Chuck? He goes, no. So I can't remember who made those. And I said, Uncle Wiggly? And he goes, yeah, that's who it was, Uncle Wiggly. And
I've called Tony Magnuson, and Tony took the phone call from Tom when Tom called to be like, can you make these snowboards?
Right.
And Tony Mag says that the meeting that he had with Tom was just kind of explaining what they were going to do. Tony could see the future. He was like, oh, wow, this is going to be, because Tony's from somewhere
Sweden.
In Europe. He's Sweden.
He's Sweden. We love Tony.
Guy. Yeah.
We became really good friends when he did, even before he did Evil.
He did Evil.
We were really, EVOL.
Yeah. And, he told me what it is. It's love backwards.
Yeah, it's love backwards. He's a good dude. And his son, Shane, is like a rip and surfer. Like, he's involved in wave pools now. And
So Tony Mag says that Tom comes through the door. He fields the call, sees what's going to happen. Like, in his mind's eye, he's like, oh my God, this is going to be bigger than skateboarding, bigger than surfing. This is because it's accessible, because he knows what it's like, snow sports in Europe, right?
Yeah. Right.
But Tony Mag never really gets into snowboarding himself.
A little bit with Evil.
I mean, like, he doesn't catch
exactly
what we caught, like that. Like, oh my God, I got to do this all the time. Snowboarding is the shit. Yeah, it's the best. He still skates now.
Oh yeah,
and he still swears by fiberglass inside the board.
Oh, good.
Like, he's like,
I like that idea.
Yeah, exactly. He's an outsider, I think, in the skateboard, like, cool guy.
Oh, good. He likes glass in his board, totally. At least a layer of glass. That's smart. That's good.
Yeah, totally. He says it's poppier. It lasts longer. It's way better.
We had that era when I was starting and building my own skates. There was a local brand called Wallbanger that was selling to Highline Cycle. They would take 2 pieces of birch, of 1/4-inch birch, really nice birch, plywood. It would come in 5x5 sheets, and they'd laminate it with polyester resin and 1 layer of glass in between. I started making some boards kind of like them a few years later, but I didn't do the glass part because I didn't like anything toxic.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want the polyester resin.
All the way back.
And my boards were snapping. Wow. Yeah, my boards were snapping. And I was like, how are theirs not snapping? And the guy that owned Highline Cycle they put a piece of polyester. A piece of glass with polyester resin, and I was just using a safe water-based glue,
which is going to break. Right.
It's actually it's just fun to hear Tony loves a piece a glass because it's brilliant. It's
100%.
And that's the secret of our Lib Tech skates that we're so. They still exist. We would put carbon in there. We'd pin it like 1 layer from the bottom, carbon, and then glass right near the top.
Yeah.
So we had 2 layers, true layer of carbon in it and a true layer of glass. So they're kind of expensive to make, but they last for almost ever.
It's unreal. All right, let's go back to this very important moment.
Yeah, the important moment is a guy named Doug Zakowski. That's my age. And so he's probably he's on the spectrum for sure too, but it didn't exist back then. No one knew what the spectrum was.
Yeah,
we both light on the spectrum.
When did that
we just
start?
both didn't.
Yeah.
No one knew what it was.
Yeah.
I actually have a daughter that's on the spectrum now, and I actually in college studied autism, so I took early childhood development, and because there was like 34 girls and 2 guys in it, and so it was a great class.
I'm seeing a theme here.
I studied autism in '84. So I was, but
that's pre-lexicon. That's not really in the lexicon.
Nobody really knew what it was.
So
no one knew what caused it. They still don't, but they really didn't know then. It was, and almost nobody had ever seen what it was.
And so nobody's really diagnosing it at that time.
I'm going to go with Doug Zakowski, like me. We're both a little bit on the spectrum.
Okay.
And the reason why is I'm going to bring in Rodney Mullen, who's also admittedly on the spectrum a little bit.
Yeah.
And so Doug's quiet too. So he's the kid that's my age that's skating this ramp with no flat bottom, Randy's ramp.
Yep.
That eventually cut one side down so it's only like 6 feet and the other side's still 12, so you can like kind of get airs, but it wasn't vert on that side.
Yeah, you
but
can
anyway,
do the one wheel.
Doug and I start skating together. He's from a different school. We live in the same area, basically, not a walking distance to our houses, but he's instrumental in my early snowboarding too, because he's my only real connection that's my age. And we kind of see eye to eye because we're both quiet, but we're, together we can talk. And his dad drives us to the Olympic skate park down in Olympia, which is the skate park that is still buried underground. They never destroyed it. It's a warehouse now. Underground there's a beautiful keyhole pool, a snake run, a bunch of, I forget what the shape of the big bowl, what it was called. But
dog leg or something?
It wasn't a kidney, but I can't think of it. But anyway, what they also had is a capsule. They had the biggest skate pool ever made in history.
Oh, shit.
They had one that was 20 something deep, because Kennewick in Washington had a 17-foot pool. So these guys wanted to outdo it. And so they made one that was, I believe it was 22 feet deep or so.
Wow.
I just know that the drop in, they had a little canyon to drop in. And I think you were dropping in, so the mellow drop there was like 12 to 14 feet deep you had to drop.
Wow. To
get through the canyon to get in even.
And so this is buried somewhere, because
it's buried now.
Because there are skateboard
this is buried.
Guys that go out and unbury bowls.
This is an indoor one, so it's a warehouse above it. But I just know there's a story that I believe it was, maybe Eddie Elgura that they had come up. They had a bunch of, I think it was when Eddie was number one skater in the world. I believe it was him that came up, him and a couple of the best guys on the Hester tour. They came and looked at it. The family that owned the park was like, let's get these guys up to skate it, because none of the locals can figure out how to skate this 22 or 25 foot bowl.
Right.
And so they came and looked at it and went, no, this thing's ridiculous. You can't skate this thing.
They didn't even skate it.
They did. They tried.
Yeah.
But eventually, Randy, this guy that had the half pipe, his little brother started coming with us when BMX was, people were starting to ride ramps. They let him ride it, and he could get up into the vert at least and get little airs. Right, but everybody else, it was just, how high can you get?
Yeah.
How close to the coping can I get?
Yeah.
And it's deadly.
Yeah.
Right? But but anyway, capsule pool. The other one was a capsule pool. The good pool was a capsule pool. Okay. They had a really good keyhole that was deep, but tight, but deep. But anyway, I started going there with Doug's dad. And anyway, over the years, Doug, by the time we got to high school, many years later, he was in driver's ed with me in 10th grade.
Sick.
We had driver's ed. He went to a private Catholic school that didn't have it. So there was like a new kid that came to our school after school for driver's ed, and it was Doug. So we were driving partners. And we were like, we know each other. But Doug ends up inheriting that ramp that was in Randy's backyard, builds it on its own frame. I think it was hooked to trees, like a tree house almost.
Sick.
He ends up making it into a quarter pipe at his house. Come to think about it, he turned it into a full half pipe eventually. He built this other side back up, got pretty good riding the half pipe, but he worked on freestyle. Like, this is way before people were doing kick flips and
even
ollies like today's ollie.
Right.
I believe Ollie Gelfand had just invented, Alan Gelfand from Florida just invented the ollie, but it was nothing like today. You don't tap your tail. We would consider if you tapped your tail on flats or on the vert, it's like, that's cheating. That's not an ollie. That's a tail tap.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
You're like, what? That's not.
I've never heard that.
So when I started
That's
seeing
incredible.
kids calling it ollie and tapping their tail a few years later, I was like, that's not an ollie. You just cheated. You're tapping your tail. Anyone could do that. You're tapping your tail. An ollie, you can't tap your tail. So we got pretty good at doing ollies, like even on flats, without tapping your tail.
Pulling it.
You got to pull it.
You got to pull it. You got to pull it with no clip.
You got to pull it. And you usually do like a 180 on flats. You do a 180 like you're imitating Mike McGill and Ollie Gelfand. But anyway, so he started getting pretty good. But in his garage, it's rainy in the Northwest, he started working on freestyle. He was always doing freestyle. He starts entering contests. He starts going to California and entering contests. It was always Rodney Mullen would win every pro contest.
Number one. Yeah.
Doug Zakowski won he was smart. He only entered amateur. He'd get first every AM contest. Rodney Mullen would win every pro contest because he's like, well, I'm never going to beat Rodney. So Doug was like arguably, one of the very best freestylers that ever existed. Like, unbelievable. And
so cool.
Pete was going to the UW years later. Pete and I didn't know each other yet, but when I started telling about Doug Z later in life, when Pete and I would start telling, Pete was like, I'd see that guy. He'd come down to the UW campus to be in front of he liked to do it in front of people because he was kind of shy. He's like, no, that guy was like, freaky amazing.
Yeah.
And he's like Rodney Mullen, the protege of Rodney Mullen, basically.
That's
and so
unreal.
Anyway, Doug was awesome. But Doug, his story is crazy. He ended up leaving. He worked for a skate shop after high school. He left. He just disappeared one day. And everyone's like, where's Doug? Where's Doug? Where's Doug? And this is where the story gets creepy. It could be a movie. It could be a movie. It absolutely could be a movie. And the guy that owned the skate shop was called Foot Power Sports. They're one of the first shops that ever sold my snowboards. And the guy that owned it, was very religious. He was older than us. It was a bike shop, Foot Power Sports. And Doug grew up Catholic, but all of a sudden, he's like, Doug doesn't work anymore. He ran off on a mission to follow Jesus. And he said he gave away everything he had. And I was like, whoa. He's pretty radical there. I mean, I just knew Doug as Doug, right?
Sure.
And anyway, he disappeared for years. And when he came back, one of the first places he stopped, this is all of a sudden into I don't remember, it was maybe the early 90s. I'm jumping ahead.
Yep.
Way after high school. He came to visit us at the Lib Tech factory, right? We were down by Gasworks Park in Seattle. It was a hot summer day. And he's like, Mike. And I looked at him and I was like, he doesn't have cult eyes. He starts telling me the story. He goes, I'm going to tell you a story because I know you'll listen to it and believe me. And like, he starts telling me the story. He goes, yeah, I mean, like, okay. So I go like, so who are you hooked up with? Like, what religion is this? Like, what group? And he's like, none. He's like, I was just like John was really religious and I grew up Catholic, but I just, I don't know. I all of a sudden felt like I had this calling. And he's like, so I don't know. I just, all of a sudden gave away everything I had. He gave away a skateboard and everything, down to flip-flops and a t-shirt and some shorts. And he said, this lady came into Foot Power Sports and said, hey, Doug's like, I think he ended up selling her the car and got a check and he used that and bought an airline ticket and he went to Hawaii. He went to Oahu. And he said he ended up preaching on the beach in Hawaii, not hooked to anything. So I'm going, oh, that's kind of cool, actually. And then I like this story.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he said he didn't know what his destination was. I was like, I like this story, Doug. He's telling me the story. But he said he was a cross-country runner in high school. And he said, one day I ran without my flip-flops, just my shorts. It was hot. I ran towards Diamond Head somewhere, but he ran up a hill. And anyway, he said he was thirsty. And he passed his house. On the way back down, he said he looked at it. And this lady gave him water. And anyway, he started telling this lady the story. At this time, he was helping run a halfway house for prisoners, ex-cons. There wasn't enough space in the jails there or something. So he said he was kind of running help feeding and running programs for ex-cons. And he said, yeah, I have this. I'm supposed to go somewhere though. I'm supposed to go somewhere beyond this. He's running this one day and he's coming back down the hill and he sees this house and he just goes in and says, hey, can I get some water? And this lady gives him water and he starts telling her the whole story. Like, I'm on this crazy mission. I don't know what it is. Anyway, she goes, you know what? She goes, here. She goes, because he goes, I think I'm supposed to go to the Philippines. I don't know why, but I'm supposed to go to the Philippines. She writes him a check for an airline ticket. As he drinks his water, walking away, he looks and her name's something Waterhouse. He's telling me the story and I'm looking going, you don't have cult eyes. You don't have these crazy eyes. He still looks like Doug. He goes, I know. He goes, that's why I appreciate it because he's going, it's freaky, man. But it's cool. So I love crazy things.
Of course,
I love aliens,
rad.
and I hope there's aliens.
Me too.
Right? And yeah, my daughter, I was like, aliens. She's in love with Stitch right now, and
cool.
But my brother and I grew up just loving Alien. All the '60s and
dude,
50s alien movies.
I watch Close Encounters at least 4 or 5 times a year, just because it's such a good movie.
Exactly.
It's
I hope there's a
makes
Bigfoot.
You want to believe.
I hope there's a Bigfoot.
Totally.
Our local.
It should be here. I mean, this is
the
where
local.
It would be.
The Quileutes where we surf. They're like, oh no, there's Bigfoot. And I'm like, okay.
There's a Bigfoot museum on the way down to Mount Hood that I
love it.
I
no, you're talking
about.
Go. Yeah, we just went down to Bachelor's a few weeks ago.
Boring, Oregon or something.
I remember driving by. I just looked and went,
Gotta go check it out.
But anyway, Doug's telling me the story, and so he has this. Now he has this check
to
get to the Philippines. He gets to the Philippines finally. This is where the story starts getting crazy. It's already a little crazy.
Yeah.
He ends up somehow, and this part I don't know. I can't remember the details. He hooks up with Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos.
Oh, Jesus.
Ends up living at their place.
No.
Ends up being their right hand, like,
come on,
their religious, like, mentor or whatever.
Because they're Catholic down there.
I think so. And he's not Catholic, though. Right, he was. But he's like...
He knows the nomenclature.
He's telling me, he's like, he's like, no, this has nothing to do with that. He's like, he goes, I'm literally being biblical. I gave away everything I have, and I'm following. There's something to... So he's all of a sudden with Marcos. And I'm going, wait, we're sitting there on the ground, we're just sitting there and like, I remember just hawking loogies and like drinking water. We're in a hot day at Gasworks Park in Seattle, and he's going, so I'm all of a sudden living with Imelda Marcos and Ferdinand Marcos.
Famous for having all those shoes.
All the shoes. And anyway, there had been a coup d'etat since this happened. Well, he's there through the coup d'etat. And he's like, he kind of knew some inside information that he was telling me.
What?
He knew some inside information. He's like, if I ever die, they got me. He's like, basically, he's like telling me like, yeah, Ferdinand was trying to get out basically of some agreements he had. And he said, there are some underpinnings going on here. And he really liked Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos, but they got him out of there on one of the last planes to leave during the coup d'etat. Jesus. They had one of their guys drive him, go, Doug, and I forget the story of what happened with his passport, how he got on the plane at the last second, but he got out of there, and now he's back seeing me. He's like, no, I'm back. I just got back. He's like, and then he ended up taking a little sabbatical, started skateboarding again, of course, bought shoes and warmer clothing, and became a skater, worked at a skate shop again for a while. But here's where the story gets crazy. He disappears again a few years later, and everyone said, yeah, I guess he's like, I don't know, he's preaching again. He went somewhere. He disappeared. No one's heard from him. His parents haven't heard from him. I wake up to a clock radio. It tells the period. So this is somewhere in the early-ish 90s, maybe 94. I don't remember exactly. 93. I wake up to a clock radio. It says, body of Doug Zakowski is found somewhere, I don't know, like Oklahoma or Nebraska. I forget, in a big field, somewhere near Texas. But they find it like in a shallow grave, like kind of chopped up and mutilated. And I wake up to that going, whoa. And so I went to his funeral, Every skater went to his funeral. Every Washington skater skating had a resurgence then.
Yep.
All the Washington skaters that knew him went, and it was a great, Rankwit's there. Everybody's there. And his parents, I knew his parents. Most people didn't know his parents, but from junior high to high school, I was the kid that hung out at his house. And his mom and dad were like, yeah, man, it's really sad because apparently he was... wherever he was, Texas, northern Texas or somewhere, they said he was working with homeless people again, and we were pretty sure that they're the ones that killed him and then buried him in the desert. Anyway, it just didn't add up when I left. I remember leaving going, well, hey, those homeless people would love him. My dad worked with homeless people. Mm-hmm. That was one of his passions. So I grew up, sometimes helping my dad down on First Avenue.
Yeah.
And I knew quite a bit about homeless people. I was like, no, that's not going to, A, they don't have a car.
It's not the way
they're not going to drive out into a desert.
Yeah.
B, they would think Doug's the coolest guy on earth. Yeah. They're like, there's a guy feeding us?
Yeah.
This skateboarder dude is feeding us, helping us, and super thoughtful guy. So it didn't add up. It's like, no, homeless people are not going to do that. They're going to think he's the coolest guy on earth. And like, yeah, we want you to hang out. Anyway, years later, it just got discovered now. A serial murder in Michigan, I believe, that had killed a ton of girls, that's in prison, started confessing to all the other unsolved ones. And he's like, yeah, I picked up a guy and a girl that were hitchhiking like in eastern Washington. They were heading to the East Coast to preach or something.
Whoa.
And he had a torture chamber in a semi.
Oh my God.
I think he killed Doug quickly, and then he had her alive for like a week or something.
Oh my God.
But I was like, whoa.
That just doesn't even seem possible.
Yeah, it's like
real. But
crazy.
What a story, this
crazy.
guy.
Yeah, and he was the nicest dude on earth, but he intermingles with snowboarding because at one point he knew I was building snowboards. When I started building snowboards, obviously we're buds, and this is when I was I think by the time I got to high school, I was starting to, into second, third prototype. He's like, hey, Mike, I built one too.
No way.
My dad had in our garage, he said, we have three skis, a few pairs of old skis. He put 3 together, which was brilliant.
Yep.
They butted together, so there's little cracks, almost like a slip board, but a little bigger cracks. But he put just a piece of plywood on top and screwed them together, and it pulls into a really wide nose and a narrow tail. And we hiked to this apartment building that had beauty bark. So there wasn't much snow in Seattle, right? We don't get that much snow.
Yeah.
But the beauty bark kind of made it so we wouldn't ruin our boards when we bought them.
It's soft enough underneath.
Yeah. And the two of us, and I just remember it was one of my prototypes that really worked. His worked a little bit, but it was one of mine that was just like, ooh, it was working. You know, it was kind of fun because at that point, you know, it was like snowboarding was, I think, you know, Burton was establishing as a real thing and Sims was. And, but I guess I should jump to what started the first snowboard that I, back in 77, I think it was end of 77, going into 78, Skateboarder magazine always had an extra. Like, here's the extra picture, something goofy, right? Like Lonnie Toft on an 8-wheeler, right? Doing a big old grind on an 8-wheeler in a pool. There was a picture of Lonnie Toft on that yellow Sims Flying Banana with the skateboard on top of the skyhooks, going off a jump and getting like 3 feet of air. His arms are out. He's in a squat.
I've seen it.
And
it's
awesome.
kind of the opposite of the Caballero shot. Just like the same thing, but just from the other angle.
And he's getting like 3 feet of air on flats. And before that, of course, I knew what Snurfers were. They sold them in hardware stores, and JCPenney sold Snurfers. Yeah, it was kind Sherman Poppin.
It was kind of skateboard adjacent, but it just didn't feel like pro. It seemed like more like
there were already ads for winter sticks. I don't know if they're ads, but Powder Magazine had a story on winter sticks on Dmitry Milovich. I'd seen.
No, Dimitri's from New Jersey as well.
He's from Jersey.
Like, so you got. You know how many Jersey guys are snowboarders? Like Evan Fiend's
and
a Jersey guy.
You know, Dmitry didn't start winter stick.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Oh, it's a big. I just found this out.
Anyway, come on. This is.
Now I'm thinking about the period I'm talking about. I hadn't seen winter stick yet.
Because 77.
I had seen
77.
I had seen
early.
two things. I'd seen Snurfers, obviously.
Yep.
And I'd seen Kico. More than Snurfers in the Northwest, we saw Kico snowboards. Have you ever seen those?
I think so. They've got the spiky top on top, and they're.
This has to be here. Dennis Nazari from Salty Peaks. For years, Transworld and Snowboard, all those magazines, they write history articles, and they always talk about Snurfer, like Snurfer, which is great.
Yep.
But I'd always say, well, in my period, I'd see a few Snurfers, but what every store had, kind of like when skateboarding was new, even before that, Ernst Hardware, JCPenney's, they all had this. They all had the Kico snowboard.
They'd be in a box, a vertical box, just like a
vertical box.
You could just pull.
Yeah,
and the box cracked on an angle, and you just pull one out.
That's right. All of us that grew up in snow areas knew about these. And if you look at this, it's better designed than a Scurfer.
Is that $5?
$5?
$5
at St. Vincent de Paul. So what happened is every year at the SIA show, I would tell like the new interns at Transworld, like, hey, but next time you write the history story, you got to write about Kico. I go, I never owned one, but they were way more tech. I go, that's what turned me on to.
They really are more tech than the Lonnie Toft.
Like, they're not far off modern pow surfers.
If you look at a Lonnie Toft.
If you look at an Asmo.
An Asmo. Right. Yeah. Like the Lonnie Toft.
Which was Bob Weber who made those.
So those didn't work that well. And people that got them, like Ernie DeLoss, he looked at the tech and said, okay, we can make this, but like, let's make that hooky edge thing functional.
Yeah.
Instead of like, so people would slice it down because it was just in the way. It didn't actually work. But look at this. This is designed, engineered.
Isn't this cool?
This is engineered.
Yeah.
It's convex on the tail.
Yeah.
It's got like speed lines. Yeah. Like it's got directional stability. Donna tells a story of when she first met Jake.
Yeah.
That the thing that he like blew her mind with was that they fall on their snowboards.
Yeah.
And one goes off.
Yeah.
And he takes the other one and puts it in the track, and it follows the exact track.
Aha.
So he was like, see? Like, that's what he was like working on.
Yeah.
He's like, we want to make these consistent.
And
that's what this is a part of.
It's
like making something that can actually do something. Yeah. Not turning. You guys, in my opinion, invented the carving thing.
For sure. And that comes from my dad. Not the design, but the influence. Because my dad was a ski racer back at Mount Rainier. He grew up in Minnesota, then Alaska, snow places, right?
Wow,
So he played hockey and he skied. And when he moved down to Tacoma in high school, he would race even into college, Mount Rainier. Rainier, I believe, had 3 lifts in a row. They were I don't know if they're Pumas or T-bars, but I don't think they weren't rope toes. They were either Pumas or rope or T-bars.
So like on the actual,
and it was called downhill, which meant everything. He said it would have a slalom flush, downhill GS, and anyway. So he drove the idea of carving into me and my brother and my sister he just loved.
These are all fish turns. It's all fish turns up until you guys start carving.
And so anyway, when I saw these in stores, I never got one. Once again, they were probably like $7 back then. I think Snurfers were like 11 or something, and these were like 7.
Yeah.
But I used to always tell the people at Transworld, like the interns that were writing articles at the trade show. I think I'd even tell like John Stouffer and all those guys, like, hey, you guys talk about Snurfer all the time, which is great, but someone's got to talk about Kico, which is even more tech, I think.
It absolutely is.
But nobody believed me. They'd all kind of...
It even says Kico on the nose.
Nobody believed me. They'd look at it like, Mike's telling a tall tale here, because that doesn't exist. Because it wasn't written anywhere, right? Well, probably the 5th or 6th SIA in a row that I was telling someone that was just going, right? Someone from a magazine. Tom Burt walks by. Yeah. Have you ever talked to Tom? You know Tom?
Oh, totally.
So Tom walks by, being from Tahoe, a snow place, and he's like, yeah, no, Mike's telling the truth. He goes, that's what I used to see too. So he backs my story.
I love it.
Then Dennis Nazari walks by, and Dennis is like, I'm going to get you guys, I'm going to find one of those, because he's got the biggest collection probably of anyone on earth.
Huge.
And he doesn't have one. He doesn't have one yet, right? Mm-hmm. So within months, he finds a couple.
Oh, wow.
And mine was at a St. Vincent de Paul, but within like a couple months, one comes in the mail, and he's like, I kept one and you get one. So he gave me this. He shipped this in the mail. In the meantime, we were just talking about this less than a half year ago. Pete and Andy Audette, one of our engineers who's born and raised out here, who's like awesome. He's like Renaissance man. He's the smartest guy on earth. We were just looking at this and talking about him, and he's going, within seconds, he's like, I found one available, like eBay or somewhere, and he goes, found 2 available. So each of them were like, buy now. So we have 3 of these now.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the other ones are in almost better shape than this. But
well, that one, when you pulled it out, I'm like, it's perfect. It doesn't have So I've held in my hand the Tom Sims fake board from 1963.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you're talking about.
So, and I called it fake. Like I said to Trent Bush, who runs the archives for the
Which it is, right? I've heard it is.
I've heard it's fake.
He mocked it up.
Yeah.
And I think Chuck's friend that I met in Long Beach Island, LBI, Joyzy, I think he verified that too.
So I think
they're like, no, Sims...
I think what happened with Sims was that he did build something in '63.
I think he did too. That's what I heard.
But it
wasn't that.
It's gone. It's lost to antiquity. Yeah. Obviously, it was in somebody's garage.
Because I don't have my first one from '78 either.
Right.
I wish I did.
So imagine '63, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
There's no way he kept it.
I believe he did it, but you're right. The inside story is he.
So the thing is,
mocked it up a little.
Yes, and that's what Dave the Weaver told me.
Yeah, I know the Weave.
He was there and he watched as Tom made a recreation of the '63 board, and then because I looked at it.
So you know the Weave.
Yeah. I met him through the Tahoe Legends. The dude's amazing.
I got a funny story about him.
Oh yeah, me too. I got a
great one. I almost became part of Sims in the early days.
Unbelievable.
The Weave flew up here to.
This is your episode. Let's hear this Weave story.
The Weave, like we're jumping all around. But,
I love it.
But and you were talking earlier. I don't remember. It was on we were talking about. Were we on the podcast? Were we talking about Boulder, Colorado?
Yes.
Yeah, we were. I
mentioned Boulder. Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was before or afterwards. But my early snowboard, so my earliest, once I quit college and started building them, I was buying urethane from Kryptonics in Boulder. I was buying urethane for
For sidewalls or for?
My tips and tails.
Tips and tails.
The sidewall, I would use originally ABS, and then I started using UHMW back then because I don't curing
know the
them.
Difference. What's the difference?
UHMW is sintered base material.
Okay.
I was curing them in an autoclave, or not an autoclave, but I have an autoclave now. But it was it was an oven in a vacuum bag at really high temperature using prepreg. This is like 1986. I was using aerospace prepreg. I live in Seattle, Boeing land, so I was buying it from a company called Armco Hitco. They're stuff they couldn't use. Yeah. Because it was out of spec for Boeing and. They build missiles. They build, I think they use wet resin for missiles.
That's why it said aerospace design.
Yeah, so this is a better use for it. So I would buy the stuff from an old guy named Orly Runyon. A lot of it had to be cured at over 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really hot. ABS melts at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So I had to go to UHMW, like base material, for sidewalls. the tip and tail, the swallowtails and the tip, I would get urethane from Kryptonics in Colorado, Boulder, and die cut it and bend it around and glue it to the core, and then it would all get bonded together. So I was
so rad.
And then one of our first presses, well, our first real hydraulic press we ever had years later, I bought from Boulder, Colorado, from Volant Skis. It was Hexels. It was Hub Zemke's from, and I believe it was Steve Link that sold it, that hooked me up.
Sick.
Did he live in Boulder?
He is.
Or was it?
Yeah,
he's a Boulder guy. Steve Link.
He's a Boulder guy. Yeah, he's definitely a Utah guy. A Colorado guy, but I think he was Boulder.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's Steve. It was Steve Link.
Yeah.
It was Steve Link.
Dope.
I was down there to look at a press for, this is like years later, we're snapping to years later, but It was like 1988, 89. We were about to make the GNU concept, and we were making some boards at Palais, and we were making vacuum bag boards in ovens with pre-preg at our place that were really tedious.
Yeah, no
And we were about to do our first wet layup boards, which I hadn't done for years. In the old days, I did stuff with wet resin, but I was about to go back into it, so we needed a real press. And I found out there were presses in Boulder that were Heads. Head used to make their skis in Boulder, Colorado back in the,
no way.
I guess, 70s, 60s, 70s, maybe 50s even.
Damn.
So somebody told me there's some presses down there. So I called the guys from Head that had somebody had like the junk pile of the old Head presses. I don't remember who it was. I think it was a guy that used to make naked boards. What was his? I don't remember his name.
Oh, wow, those naked boards.
I think it was a guy that made naked boards.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I know where there's a few presses. So I fly down, me and Randy Copeland, the guy that wore the suit and tie on our brochure, we fly down there. We see the presses, and they're hideous. They're hideous. And we're like, oh, this is a bummer. And we just got a little bank loan, a tooling loan, so we could buy a press. And so we were getting ready to go to lunch, like, hey, fun trip to Boulder, and we didn't have any money, so it was just fun to take a flight even. And anyway, we were walking somewhere near maybe because it was the Naked Skateboard Factory, or we were walking somewhere. It was a nice warm spring day, and all of a sudden I hear, hey, Mike. I don't know anybody there. And I look, and it's like Steve Link. It's like, oh, I know Steve Link from the snowboard contest, like from Breckenridge.
Wow.
And it's Steve Link, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I go, well, we're secretly looking for presses. We're looking at these Head presses, but they weren't very good. And he goes, I know where there's a better press. And I'm like, what? And he goes, it's really close to here. It was Volant Skis. They were the skis, it was Hank and Bucky Kashawa. They were building skis. I think one of them or both of them were engineers. One of them used to work for K2 maybe. I don't know, but there was the Kashawa brothers and Rippin' Skiers. They were making the stainless steel top skis, and they were just getting going. They had a patent on making skis with a stainless steel top, where that was the structure of the ski.
Sure.
Right? Like barely any glass on the bottom, not much on top. We go to this factory. Steve takes us to the factory, and they're like, yeah, we just bought all these presses from Hexel. Hexel went out of business. And I forget what Hexel was at the end. They were originally in Mammoth Mountain, Hexel, wow. And then they were in Reno, Nevada. Maybe Sparks or Reno. But somehow they got all the equipment when Hexel went out of business. Hub Zemke was done with it. I think he moved up to work for O'Brien Water Skis, actually, to be honest.
Damn.
That's how he got his job with Sims. He was up in Washington all of a sudden, years later. So we go look, we meet one of the Kashawa brothers, which I was just enamored, and it was the first day of their production ever. It was literally, he goes, this is our first day we ever started production. Shit. We've been prototyping for a few years. But anyway, he's like, yeah, we do have a press we'd sell you. He goes, one of the presses at Hexel burned at the Hexel factory. So we just got the frame, and it's all repainted, but the guts are out of it. The hydraulics, most of it was gutted. And they said, yeah, we'll sell it to you for like $3,000. You just have to get it up there.
Oh, wow.
So we bought it, and it turned into our first press that started making the GNU concept. When we...
I've handled
remember the GNU concept? They were really lightweight.
Murray had one.
Yeah. They're super light.
They were lightweight. They were thin through the middle compared to the other.
They're very thin.
They were very modern. That board right now, if you looked at it right now, you wouldn't know what era it's from. They flexed right through the middle. They flexed right,
and we developed, which most people would never know this. The only people that care probably are the other engineers or people in the snowboard industry. But at that point, on that board, we developed with Bob Chapala, who's still around. He's 85 now, still comes here every Thursday. He's an epoxy chemist. We developed through Nitex a tri-axial glass. We developed a library of 3 or 4 tri-axial and biaxial glass weaves that to this day the whole snowboard industry uses. Different brands make them, not Nitex, not Hexel Nitex anymore. But that's where it was originated.
So was it? What did you design? The stitched weave.
They were doing for the boat industry, tech industry.
Yeah.
They were doing stitched 45-degree glasses. And I think for boat, they had some tri-ax, but everything was way too heavy. It was all boat, thick boat hulls.
Yeah, like 20.
And so we met these guys. Bob introduced us to the Nitex guys, who at the time I think were owned by Hexel. And anyway, we're like, hey, if we could get, it was the what if, we're the little guys, but they did it. We came up with a 28-ounce glass, a 22-ounce, a 21, all these tri-axes and biaxes.
Those are pretty heavy, aren't they?
Yeah, the 28s were, but not for snowboards. It's a good weight. But anyway, what was kind of fun is that's what was in the GNU concept. The other thing that was in the GNU concept that ended up being futuristic for the skateboard industry many, many, many years later, they still use it to this day. I wanted an innovative way to make a top sheet, right? And top sheets, I didn't like ABS top sheets. I thought they added weight. Our pre-preg boards we'd make with the most minimal top sheets we could figure out how to make. But I just really didn't like ABS top sheets. And I wanted to do something different. And so we built these boards upside down. I made this crazy mold that had vacuum suction in the bottom. And it just hit me that, wait, nothing sticks to Mylar, which is PET. When we try it years earlier, trying to invent new ways to do top sheets, because we didn't really have access to all the European plastics, the good ones. Well, we didn't because we didn't have any money. There were places in the U.S. that could make you big production runs, like a pallet of it, but we had to buy small quantities. So I tried printing everything. We didn't print. We had a silk screener we'd farm out. We definitely were sensitive. We didn't want toxins in our factory.
Right.
But
where did that come from? Just on an aside,
which the
no toxins. You've already talked about it with your skateboards.
I think my mom was really good in the 70s. Even I'm just reading little articles like, whoa, plastics are. I knew plastics you just didn't want. You didn't want any of the aromatics, any of the volatile. Anything you could breathe off of, let's say, polyester resin or acetone.
Totally.
Knew that wasn't good for you, but new plastics. Microwaves were a new thing in the mid-'70s. She's like, ooh, they emit fumes off the plastics that can get into the food. And she just told me to tell me about that.
That's interesting.
I don't know where she was getting it, but it was drilled into me. And so from day one, I was like, ooh, I don't want to breathe plastics. I don't want to.
I feel like that could have contributed to those wicked, weird, rare diseases that Jake got taken out by, because he was dipping
urethane.
He was dipping urethane,
and it was a solvent-based urethane.
I can only imagine, if you're trying to get 20 boards done, right, in a day, you got 18, and then you're you strip down your dress, and then someone says, you know what, I can't meet you for dinner for another 20 minutes. So you run back in,
for sure,
and you don't put on the respirator. You just dip the
thing. And I don't think they were even wearing a respirator.
Right.
Because Chris Carroll and Andy Coughlin both came to work. They both rode for GNU eventually, right? At different times, but both of them. I had the honor to have both of those be team riders of us, right? Andy was really short-lived because he became head judge or one of the judges on the world tour that year. So he was for a very short time, one of our team riders. But Chris Carroll for a while was a team rider. Chris was like, hey, I worked in that factory in the summer. And he's like, no, he goes, those holes in the nose, why Jake won't get rid of the ropes is because they have to hang those wooden boards to dry.
Right.
And they need the holes. And he goes, no, we dip these things. It's so toxic. It's insane. And I was like, wait, what? There's drum. He said it was full 55-gallon drums with the lids off. They dip them in.
Yeah.
And that's why the boards can only be so long.
Right. That's why they were like 145s or 150s.
Yeah, that was like a max length on their wood boards.
Right.
But yeah, so where were we just talking about toxins and how did we just lead to that?
Because we were talking about fiberglass and the concept.
So
the weave on
the
fiberglass. So with
Nitex, this weave.
You're like, if we could get we only are going to make 30 boards or something.
And so these guys, we worked with them, and we were the only one on the market that had that. This was in the 80s, right? Like 87, 88, going into 89, and I can't even remember, but it must have been more than 15 years later. I just remember. I think it was Matt Cummins, someone from his shop. He had Northwest Snowboards, which is a fantastic, huge,
incredible
beautiful
operation.
shop.
Yeah.
Somebody from there, might have been Brian Rushforth or Matt. They called and they go, "Hey, we just had the Burton session with I forget the name of the rep, super nice guy, that aggressive sales guy that sold a lot of boards. I can't think of his name. He applied with us a few years later, but nice guy though, and but very aggressive back then. And they were basically telling the story that, hey, and I ended up seeing it in the magazine too. Like Transworld wrote an article, Burton has invented something new. They've come up with a way where glass, this is literally like 15 years later, it's not woven. So they had almost all their boards made in Europe always back then.
Yes.
At Kyle and Oldenburg.
Yeah.
Right? A kid ski factory and just a general ski factory.
Yeah.
Who did good work.
They still brag about the fact that they've continually used that.
I think they still use one of those two, right?
One of the twos, and the fact that Jake like was walking around in the middle of like it's dark now, it's a dark cold night, and he stumbles into the factory.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Like it's an actual.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's like a happenstance.
Yeah.
Everybody said no, we can't do it. We can't make these things, and he goes into the one, and the guy goes, Okay.
And I think that was
became
Kyle,
partners.
maybe. It might have been Oldenburg, it could be Kyle.
Yeah.
But anyway, the way they all build their skis in Europe, it's so common back then. I think they still do it to some extent a lot. They all use pre-cure, where their top sheet and even their base, a lot of times, already has the fiberglass cured on it.
Right.
Which means it has to be sanded afterwards. And to us, it never, what? Like, why would you do that?
What is the advantage?
There's none.
It's just you use less resin, or?
Howard Head, I believe, came up with that process, or it evolved from Howard Head. He was the guy that came up with the first composite skis that had aluminum in them. Okay. And I think eventually other people worked into glass.
Maybe it's a consistency thing, because there is
I think the guy that old guy now that invented Titan hockey sticks, he's actually a skier. He's a Finlander. His dad was one of the great hockey guys in Finland, but he's a skier. He I think he was on the Olympic team. The guy that invented Titan hockey sticks. But his claim to fame is claims he was one of the first guys that brought fiberglass to skis back then. And then never made it that big. So went, let's try some fiberglass in hockey sticks instead of skis, because he's a skier. His dad's a hockey guy. And then he eventually signs this unknown guy, well, I guess kind of known, just not by many people yet, named Wayne Gretzky, and the rest was history.
Yeah, those sticks.
But yes, Canadian distributors like, hey, they've got this young guy that might give your sticks a try. But
I grew up not that far from where Gretzky played as a kid.
Nice.
He was in Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. Right.
Yeah, I always love the name of that town.
Yeah, my dad.
I was WHL. Don't they have or they're far enough east that they play the WHL right at the end?
I think they did. Yeah. I don't know much about hockey.
Yeah.
But my friend's dad said that when Wayne Gretzky was like a little kid, like a kid, that the town would come out just to watch him play like little league hockey, because he was so good that he would draw parents of other kids kind of thing. Like people would be like, oh, Gretzky's playing. Like he was like so far ahead of everybody else, like which is like a Jamie Lynn. Like when I would see, say up in Canada, Devin Walsh ride as a high schooler, or Natasha Zurich, it's like there's this special thing that these guys have. Yeah. And Jamie's got it. Everybody sees it. Everybody sees it in Jamie when he was like a kid. Yeah. Remember Bass says something about like, when this guy starts landing things, we're all dead. Right. Like he's and
the truth, he was landing things already.
Yeah, probably. Right.
I remember seeing him land a nice big 360 air off a mogul at Baker. Yeah. When I just heard about him from Paul Farrell. Paul's who was here earlier. He's our binding guy now. Yeah. Paul. Yeah. Paul was one of the first. He's one of the first five of us. Yeah. When there was only five, it was.
He's the Pharaoh.
He's the Pharaoh. Yeah. He's the Pharaoh, and he one of his claim to fame's, he's super talented board sportsman.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And when he was our team manager, for years he was our team manager. Yeah. There was a year at Baker where Bank Slalom was coming up, and a bunch of the guys' contracts. This is a time when snowboarding was starting to get pretty fancy. There's a little bit of a prima donna effect where a lot of guys wanted a lot of money and didn't want to be in front of a camera, though. Everyone was too cool for camera, for real. it was kind of like
almost
like a hippie thing, but they weren't really hippies. I wish they were, but they weren't.
Yeah.
They're too groovy though. They're like, yeah, I don't really want to shoot with a photographer. I'm kind of not into that anymore, but I need $80,000 a year and Anyway, Paul was facing a bunch of guys like that on our team, and every team manager was facing that. But I remember he had like 3 or 4 of our big contracts up with some of our riders. Anyway, Banker Beck Solom comes. And he beats them all. He wins, takes first place. Totally. He wins pro, and he was like, all right, what do you want on your contract now? Like, I just take all you down. And to me, what I love so much about that is the year before, in the contest, I remember watching Paul's run. He had a run where he was like on the seat of his pants, and that's why he'll push it to his limit. That's why he's fun to watch. Like he'll eat it, or he won't. And if he doesn't, he's going as fast as he can possibly go. The year before, he put in a run where he was going so fast, and he had the fastest time, and I forget why they didn't count it. Something happened where it was controversial because there was like no way that you just beat Rob Morrow and you beat all these guys.
Right.
You're just Paul Farrell, right?
Yeah.
They didn't count his time because it was just, I forget, it was, everyone else was within tenths of a second or hundreds of a second, and then his was, I don't remember, it was like a second ahead of the best.
And they're like, the
real pros.
Equipment failure must have been.
I remember Paul coming back and telling me that I know that was my real time, and I go, I believe you because I saw it, and you were just on the seat of your pants, barely hanging on. I believe you, and I remember just the heckling that he got, and the next year he goes out and wins it.
That's the
best.
And
then the best part, that was the best part. The second best part is that year Gwen called me and was like, "Can you make the trophies?" And we built over Christmas that year when everyone was gone from the factory was in Seattle. I built skis for fun, a spoof of Solomon.
Yes,
I remember. I built those original Shalom skis.
Shaloms, yeah.
And Gwen's like, "Can you make some trophies?" Like, "Oh, I got an idea. We'll make all the winners get skis." Because that's back when skiers and snowboarders theoretically didn't like each other.
Yes.
And I thought skiers were great because I came from skiing, but I understood it. There was tension there, and how fun will this be? And so we went and got gold plaques made that I nailed in each one, for each prize. And Paul won. Paul won the ski. And I was so happy because I spent the whole night. I didn't get to see his run the year he won it.
Yeah.
Because I got there for the awards ceremony. I was awake for like 3 days straight going, I can't let Gwen down. I can't let Duncan down. I can't let Amy and Gail and all the Baker people down. So I just barely made it right as they're handing out the awards. If I remember that year, they did the awards outdoors. I think it was the only time they did at the old lodge. The new lodge didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
I think they were outdoors, announcing. And anyway, winner, Paul Farrell. I was like, yes, he gets one of the skis. So we get to bring it back.
Sick.
I was afraid. I didn't want to see him leave all those skis.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was awesome.
Okay. I mean, my favorite era of snowboarding and like the creativity that you guys are doing where it catches my attention is when the Farrell comes out.
Yep.
Which is, all those boards came out right at that perfect time. The Dukester, the Skidder was like a late addition, but there was the Dukester.
And so do you know who each of those names are?
I know all of them.
Dukester is Temple.
I know all of them. Temple is Dukester.
Because there's little brothers. Matt and Mike Cummins' little brother, right? And so he's a little cute kid,
he was the Dukester.
And so they call him Dookie. Hey, Dookie. Hey, Dookie. And so we call it a Dukester. And then we have the General Joe. That was their dad. Who competed.
Yeah.
He was awesome. So we get the General Joe. And then, the Farrell was Paul. And Paul's was the mainstream average size board.
And
Dukester
then the
was the little
Skidder
one.
was maybe little B or someone?
Oh, Skidder was a kid that worked for us. We called the Kid. And anyway, the kid and his dad knocked on our door one day. And Dad was like, hey, can we get a job for the... I can't think of his name right now. We talk about this.
The Skidder
all the time because we call him Kidder. Kidder, Skidder. It turned into, hey, Kidder, hey, Skidder.
I love this.
But he was awesome. His dad was with him. We gave him a job, but he was underage for really working in the shop. So he could sweep floors. He couldn't do real jobs.
Yeah,
we let him sweep and do things, and we let him earn a board.
Skidder. I love this guy.
He ended up moving up to... He became a hardcore snowboard dude and moved up somewhere near Glacier. I forget where.
Across paths of ride, just in my life at that moment was
Eric Granstrom. Got his name. Eric Granstrom, the Kidder.
The Kidder.
We had a guy that would Yeah.
I love it.
Anyway, Eric Granson was awesome, but we called him, Kidder, evolved from Kidder, Skidder.
So when I moved to BC, we did a test shift at the Toronto ski show for Murray. Selling snowboards. Can you sell snowboards or whatever? And so learn these snowboards, and it was the Dukester Farrell and the General Joe. What were the Lib boards at that time? It was Acme,
Matt Cummins,
and the Matt Cummins,
the Intercourse, and the Doughboy.
And the very first Matt Cummins kink, I think, was the year that I started.
Did you know Randy Friesen?
93. I met Randy through.
Were you around for Lib Tech? Its first year almost died, and we were saved by Randy Friesen. Do you know that story? At your trade show, the big trade show in the big Coliseum there.
Yeah. No, I had no idea.
We might not exist without Randy Friesen.
Wow.
So Murray and Paul were gladly, they already did GNU.
Yep.
GNU disappeared for a year, so all of a sudden it turned into Nitro, and GNU disappeared Windline didn't pay their bill. They started Nitro. The guys that own Nitro now have nothing to do with that. They're awesome. Tommy and Sepp are the best guys on earth.
Amazing,
yeah. Windline didn't pay the bill to Paul A. So then they went to Elon. They didn't pay the bill there. So Sepp and Tommy jumped in. They were working for Nitro reps and distributors. Sepp was a distributor, and I think Tommy was a designer and everything.
Amazing.
They jumped in. I don't know, somewhere they found money in a way to go, hey, can we take over, basically pay the bill, take over from Windline?
Wow.
So they're good guys. They're the best guys on earth.
Yeah.
But anyway, the year that GNU didn't exist, we started cold turkey, had to start from scratch. We still owed the bank. Windline owed us $400,000. They weren't going to pay us because they were owned by a law firm. They weren't paying North Sales, who they owed money to. We found out because North Sales, they'd always say, well, we owe North Sales. You guys are off season. We owe them the money. We'll pay you later. And then we met the guys somewhere at a trade show, the North Sales guys, and they're like, yeah, they're not paying us because they pay you guys. And we're like, they're not paying you either. But anyway, they never did pay. So we had to start from scratch. I called every material supplier we had and said, listen, I'll pay you 10% more till the old bill's paid off. My partner, Fred, at the time, he decided to just pursue GNU and getting paid with Windline. Pete, myself, and Randy Copeland went, we're never going to get paid. It's a law firm.
Yeah.
We're 100% right. We got a contract and they owe it to us, but we're not going to win. It's just not possible. So we said, we know that Fred probably won't be able to pay you. So we went to the bank and we owed them like $150,000. It was Sea First Bank or Rainier Bank in Seattle. We go, you're probably never going to get paid. So can we get the keys back to our factory? And can we get a little more money, like another $50,000? And they said yes. Because we said, otherwise you're never going to get the money. We called every material supplier and go, you're probably never going to get paid by GNU, by Fred and GNU, because Windline's not going to pay him. It's not Fred's fault.
Yeah.
It's not his fault at all, but he's trying, but he's never going to get paid. So we said, please keep selling to us. We'll pay you 10% over until his bill's paid off. Anyway, our epoxy glass supplier, Bob Chapala, who still, like I said, is 85, still comes here. He was a Dow chemist. And he's the guy that set up the Kirshner Brothers K2. That was him.
Wow.
In the 60s. And all the why is the whole water ski industry here? He set every one of them up with epoxy. Guy. So he still comes here. He's great. He's fantastic and doing great. But he says, hey, do you need any money? And he used to always say that. And he drives a really old car, right? You wouldn't know but he's loaded, right? He used to always say that to us. But anyway, the bank agreed to give us $50,000 more on the loan, gave us keys back to our factory. And Bob just happened to come by like, how's it going? We're going to pay you 10% more until the old bill's paid off. He's like, do you guys need any money? And I was like, actually, it was a few months later down the road. We could use about $200,000. He pulled out a checkbook, wrote us a check for $200,000. And he goes, I better call Diane. When I write anything that big, I better check with her. And he's like, all right. And anyway, back then it was like 11% interest, which I think the normal interest was like maybe 8 at a bank or 9. It was high back then.
Sure.
But it was like 11% interest. You'll pay me in 2 years and you pay me every month. Awesome, dude. But anyway, that's what saved us. That saved us. And then we get to our first trade show ever, or was it our second trade show? Second trade show ever. First one in Canada. We did one down in Long Beach. Not Long Beach, San Diego. Randy Copeland, myself, And my girlfriend at the time, Tracy, who's from Mount Baker, the three of us drive down there in my little 2-wheel drive truck with the booth in the back. And anyway, I taught Randy. Randy was like businessman, right? But I was like, you're going to do it the way Pete, Dan Donnelly, and I used to do it in all the GNU days. We stopped you sleep in people's yards. You find a yard with a nice hedge, and just you figure they're going to wake you up in the morning, nice right? Hedge. But we just happened to sleep in a yard that had dog poop that we didn't know. Like all night, we're like, something stinks. We woke up and there was dog poop everywhere. But we woke up and anyway, Randy was a good sport, right? And we did our first trade show in San Diego, and that's where we hooked up with Mike Miyazawa, who's our Japanese distributor to this day. But then we go up to Canada, and we already knew Murray and Paul, so like, yeah, we're going to do Lib Tech. We don't, they were cool. I think they still worked with Windline on stuff, but they're like, they go, we don't want to know what's going on there, but they're, but we'll work with you guys. And they were awesome. And so they set up the trade show booth. We go into the trade show, and it's me and Tracy and Randy again, and Murray and Paul, and Randy Friesen. Randy Friesen, I think Paul Culling was riding our boards too. They were all guys that had been riding GNU that jumped to Lib Tech because Murray and Paul now you're going to be on Lib Tech, and they loved it. And I don't know if I knew Randy that well yet. I think I knew him a little bit, and I met Paul a few times. You know Paul Cullings?
Of course.
Luxury snowboards. And
he went and worked for Murray years later.
Ski racer.
Amazing dude.
We get to the show, and it's day one, and anyway, I think day one goes pretty good. But day two, anyway, Ross Rebagliati kept coming over. He rode for Burton, right? Yeah. Now get this, at the time he was a freestyler.
Yeah.
He wasn't a racer. He probably raced because everyone had to do every event back then, but he was a freestyler. And there's a trampoline at the show that people were all jumping on and doing their snowboard tricks. But anyway, Burton had a new model. I forget what it was. But our board was the lightest board, like we were kind of marketing, the lightest board on earth, the Matt Cummins. And so he kept coming over and going, I didn't know who Ross was. I knew he was a team rider of Burton. And he's going, yeah, that might be light, but I could break this thing so easy. And I was like, well, you probably could. I go, you can break anything if you want to.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, but I can break this. And he just, anyway, for the first day, he kept saying that. And then day two, he kept coming back. And so finally, I just go, and he kept saying it with customers around, right? And I go, well, bring your board over. I go, bring your board over. I'm sure I can break that too. And so anyway, he goes, all right, let's have a break off. And anyway, so we both lay into the boards with our hands, and neither of them break, right?
Right.
And then he takes his foot and goes, wham, and karates it and breaks ours. I was like, dude, we weren't really trying to break them. Like, I'm not going to put my foot on your board. I'm not really trying to break. I was just trying to show you a normal, like hard flex. You're not going to break it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Of course he can break it with a karate chop.
And did he cross camber it and break it? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, like from the back, and you can lean on pretty much anything.
I think he did from the back. Yeah. I think it was because the inserts popped out, right? Because forward they wouldn't have.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't have popped, right?
So I don't remember. I just know I just remember when he did it. Like my girlfriend at the time's there, and like anyway, all of our guys. Randy Friesen, by the way, wasn't there when this happened. He was taking a break. He was just there as a team rider, coming in, coming out, going to the tramp.
Yeah.
But Randy comes back from his food break or whatever, and here's what happened. I remember we just immediately pull the board out of there because an insert popped out because it broke right in the middle, and anyway, but everyone heard it because it was just like bang, and we were right in the middle of the show where the tramp was, and it was what was the magazine? Concrete Powder, maybe.
Yep.
Like they're right there announcing from the booth, and they were on our side. I learned later. Highly on our side.
Yeah.
Because, they're very sympathetic, but we were like, we're screwed. It's our first year. We're the ex-GNU guys, but we got this new super light brand, the first cap snowboard on earth.
Yeah.
They're all skeletons. They're kind of radical looking. We're screwed, right? And I just remember me and Randy and Tracy and Paul and Murray Well, anyway, Randy Friesen comes back and he's like, what's up, guys? And we're all like, we just had the worst thing happen ever. And of course, he knows Ross inside and out. He's a local.
Yeah.
They're both local Canadians that ride, that know each other really well. And he's like, what did he do? And he's like, all right. And he just goes over to the Burton booth with his ass. So like, probably sees Ross, where's your board? And just takes Ross's board. And I don't know if he did it with his hand or his foot because I didn't see that part. I just hear, bang, I hear that, and everyone's like, anyway, the crowd cheers. Now the crowd cheers. Before it was just everyone's stunned.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, yeah, just cheering.
Oh my God.
And that's when I realized the concrete powder guys are like, yeah, they're over on our side just telling us how rad that was. And everyone's like, yeah, Randy. Well, then Ross calls his dad, who I think's a lawyer.
Oh, God.
It's either that or he has a lawyer. He's a businessman with a lawyer. Whichever it was.
Yeah.
They show up a couple hours later with briefcases and suits and ties, a couple dudes.
For real.
And Ross.
What?
And they come to our booth, and this is where concrete powder is awesome. They say they're going to arrest me, Randy Copeland, and Randy Friesen. And they weren't going to arrest Murray and Paul, but I don't think. But it was because they surround us, and Randy's got a suit and tie on, Randy Copeland.
Yeah.
He always has on.
Yeah.
And they're going to arrest the three of us.
What the hell?
Right? And so I think concrete powder starts mediating it, going, dude, like to Ross, like, this isn't cool, man. Yeah. This isn't cool. But he's sitting there with his dad, and the irony is he's cool now. I've seen him since, and everything's great. You know, he's a totally different Ross.
Totally.
And I could tell at the time, like, there was a little daddy. Daddy was kind of like,
of course.
And I think that's why Ross probably rebelled a little, and but became a little looser, right? But anyway, they're like basically saying they're going to sue us. They want to have us arrested. They were going to call the police and have us arrested. And we're like, you're going to have us arrested? And concrete powder's like, dude, you can't do this. Like, this is ridiculous. Well, anyway, we get to the point where, as Randy Copeland, and I think Murray and Paul they're big dudes, right?
Yeah,
hockey players. And they're like, they're all getting into it. And I feel the nicest little tug, like, deet, 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 deet. And I think it's Randy Friesen maybe that hooked this up, or maybe it was, I don't know who it was, but I see this dude behind me. He's like, come here. And the guy's like, hey, like it was a Burton model that wasn't on the market yet. Nobody could get it, right? They only had it at a few camps. So the one Ross had too, he was like almost crying that it was gone because nobody had it.
Yeah.
You can't get this thing, right? And that's what they were saying. You can't replace this thing. They don't even exist. And they're like all pissed. And this guy's like, hey, I got one of those boards. He goes, I'll trade you one of your Matt Cummins for that exact board.
No way.
Yeah, and anyway, and Ross's board had bindings on it.
Yeah.
Right? So Ross's broken board's sitting there somewhere, but anyway, I came out then and like concrete powder. I think they even had microphones there for all of us because they're like recording it. Anyway, I was like, hey, I've got a proposition for Ross and his dad. Like, if we could give you magically the same board, we'll even put your bindings on it. Is all good? And he's like, you can't do that, but yeah, if you could. Like, all right. And like, anyway, we got the board with the bindings. So I go backstage with the dude he brings us the board. We're putting the bindings on, and we're like, holy shit. There's a serial number on it scratched out. And he's like, I stole it from the camp this summer.
Oh my God, no way. That's amazing.
And so we put the bindings on. I think that's when I said, hey, can we put the bindings on? I went and got the bindings because I partially shadowed or covered part of it. I don't remember. The distracted. But so we end up with all the media there, concrete powder, us shaking hands with, Randy Copeland's got a suit and tie on, but it's me, Randy Copeland, Randy Friesen, shaking hands with Ross and his dad. And literally, Dad's got a briefcase and a suit and tie.
That's fucked up.
And I think they might have made, I can't remember this for sure, but they might have made Ross put on a button-up shirt even. Whatever it was funny, but we're handing him the board, and I'm just giggling going, I didn't even tell our people yet. I'd waited till the whole thing was long gone. And then I was like, guess what? That thing was a ripped off hot board from the Burton summer camp.
Unbelievable.
And that's what, anyway, so years later when Ross got caught with the THC at the Olympics, I remember telling everyone, because he was straight edge. He was super straight edge then, right? He was when he was young. No, because that was part of the deal. He was like,
he was really
He was like this like super straight edge guy. That's why he was like super cocky and like, oh, break your board. And I remember Randy Friesen, like, because Randy's Mennonite. Randy Friesen's a Mennonite.
I didn't know that.
And like a modern Mennonite, right? Like he's like a modern snowboarding Mennonite that's pretty loose with his Mennonite skills and
like drives a car kind of thing.
I think he smoked some weed.
And he smoked some weed.
So anyway, that's the thing, because I remember he used to tell me, he's like, oh, this Ross Rebagliati, he's like, he's the jock, straight edge dude. So in the Olympics, when he got caught with THC, I remember going, oh, they're wrong on that. They've got the science wrong on that. That guy, I go, there's no way that guy. I go, I believe it. Because remember, he's like, I didn't smoke any pot. I was like, I actually believe him. The guy I knew, I was like, no, he was straight edge and like kind of uptight. And
yeah.
Well, then I learned more about him. It's like, I ended up running into Baker or something a few years after the Olympics. And I was like, hey, Ross. Like everyone's like, oh, he's cool now. He's like rad. I'm sure he was like, oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Because he would have been just a little kid.
Yeah, he was
would
young.
have been like 18, 17, 18.
Yeah, he might have been 17.
Like cocky.
I'm going to say 17.
I can break your board.
That's what he was. He could have been 16. He was pretty jacked up. He was probably 16 and like
a little kid.
Pumping iron, and he was strong. He was talented. He was actually really good. I mean, everyone was like, he's a great freestyler back then. And,
he's one of my favorite interviews I've done, just because nobody asked him anything about anything but pot after that.
Right.
Since 98 until I interviewed him, 5 years ago. Nobody was like, well, you were a freestyler before you were on the cover of Transworld. Like, you wrote for West Beach. You were a designer. Right. Like, he's like, fuck, dude, nobody asked me any of this.
And the funny thing is, Peekaboo Street later in that Olympics, they said, you heard the controversy was, she may have THC in her system. And then there was, they just were like, it just went away. They didn't ban her, right? And everyone was like, well, how come because he did they reinstate his medal? I can't remember.
So he told the story on the show.
Yeah.
He left Japan with the medal.
Okay.
Like, they just couldn't get it. And then they figured out, it's not even on the banned substance list of the IOC. Right. So he didn't break any rules. So
because I heard Peekaboo Street, she tested positive too.
That's funny.
And that's when they kind of freaked, like, we can't ban her.
Right.
But snowboarding, they're rebels.
We
can ban him. They wanted to ban him. They were like,
so bad for snowboarding in some ways.
Yeah.
Because it solidified this
the
image as like a bunch of derelicts, which we were. Like,
sure,
you talk about that.
So maybe it's good it's also good for the image in a certain way.
Bad, right?
Yeah, so, a little of each.
It was really on the nose.
Yeah.
But the board stealing thing at that time, I lived in Cyprus. I lived in Vancouver. 93 was the first season. 93, 94, nice. And for a few seasons there, all three local mountains would have chalkboards of like, lock up your board.
Yeah.
We've lost 93 boards so far this year, 110 boards this year. Like,
that was that era.
Yeah, there was so much theft. Snowboarding was so appealing, and dude, we'd get boards in November and be sold out for the rest of the year. Right? We can't get any more because. So this is one thing that I'd love to hear your take on. I just heard it from Doug Dow, worked at Hogarth Sports up there. He said Jamie Salter went to Pele and bought all the production time. And so if you wanted to get a board made, any kind of brand, he became a kind of broker in between.
That sounds
brands.
That sounds legit. We weren't, we were only with him a couple of years. As soon as Kemper moved in, we moved out. But I stayed in touch with Pele for years because Winline didn't pay them either.
Oh wow!
So Walter Knauter, who was the guy that spoke perfect English, he ran the business of the business.
Yeah.
The family were like the engineers, and Walter's like the genius. I don't know if you ever heard of Walter Knauter. He's brilliant, right? And he's still around, and I forget, he's like selling Austrian milk to China now, and he's like he's got his fingers in every pot. But he's
cool.
He worked tight with Jamie, but he used to fly into Seattle. Because when he didn't get paid by Winline, they have an insurance policy. Austria, for the ski industry, they support it and give an insurance policy. So they paid him like 90% of the unpaid bill he got. So I believe he did say that. I think he did tell me at some point that Jamie had like done some big deal with them.
How many boards can you make? Can you put on a night shift of 8 hours? Like let's say 20,000 boards at this amount of money.
And they ended up building an underground factory below the factory they have to store extra tools and raw materials. When snowboarding grew so fast, no one knew if they could get enough materials.
Right.
They tried to store almost a year in advance of materials in case there was some shortage. But Paulé they ended up getting to be bigger than Rossi at one point, where they made over 1 million units in 1 year.
That's insane.
Which is amazing because the family still lived above the factory. I've eaten in their house. I've hung out with them up there, and you'd go down to the urinal down below, and everyone from the factories there, and the family would like, hey, they only have a couple bathrooms up here, but there's the big industrial urinals, and
Jesus.
But it smelled like food. You're in the factory, you could smell whatever mom was cooking up there. But they got to be bigger than Rossignol for at least 1 year, biggest ski company in the world, and they when I dealt with them, their staff was, I think the office staff was 3 people. And I think Walter told me the biggest it ever got up to was maybe 12. And
whoa.
I know when we were part of Quiksilver, when they bought Rossignol, I forget how many office people they have, like 600 or something. And Paulet was bigger than them, and they had 12.
That's insane.
And
so I've said this twice on mic this year, that you personally took a string, and we're going, okay, these are just radial side cuts, so let's measure the string. Okay, let's try, let's build a board with a 7 meter, we'll build a board with 8 meter, 9 meter, 10 meter, whatever increments you did. And then you're like, damn, a 160 with an 8 meter is pretty dead on the money, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like imagining you doing this and thinking at the time, Rossi's got 30 engineers.
Right.
And they hadn't figured it out. They couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Because they're not thinking in the right way.
Right.
Because you're building the board, then riding the board.
Right. That's what we're doing.
Build the board, ride the board.
Yeah.
Build the board, ride the board.
As far as like, the first camber boards without fins.
Yeah.
Chris Sanders, we and Chris Sanders simultaneously. I guess I was kind of working alone at that point.
Same year.
That's when my John Heine, my boyhood friend, we quit college together our junior year and started building those black and yellow snowboards. And then he decided to go back to college up at Western, got his degree, and he finished his degree in math. He got a master's in math. But he's like, I'm not sure if snowboarding is going to go anywhere. And he went and joined the race team and became a ski racer. But so I was kind of alone for a while, and that's when I just met Pete, and he came like the next year. I was kind of alone for about a year.
Yep.
And then he started helping me a little bit. I started teaching him how to put edges on and everything. But when he first met me, I said, hey, I've got this new idea. Because at this point, I have no one to even talk to about. I don't remember if Doug Zakowski had left yet. I think he might have left on his tour. I really had almost nobody to talk to about snowboards. So you want someone to talk to. I talked to my dad about it a lot, and he was a skiaholic, so he was my best guy to talk to about it. And carving was his life. He's got pushed carve.
Rad.
Because skiers back then all skidded. Skidding was in them. Short skis that were made for skidding were what everyone was selling.
They were actually made for skidding.
They were made for skidding. They're called shorts. And this is in the 70s, in the later 70s. And my dad, when he got us into skiing, was like, nope, forget everything you see out there. You want to carve. He taught us to drive our leg. The first day we were snow plowing, he's like, now pick up your inner ski and drive that lower leg in and carve. And so he's got to influence that. So, but anyway, the first year of, second year after quitting college and doing these 5-fin snowboards, I started building boards with no fins and just steel edges and camber, right? No rocker. And that was about the year I started building those. Selling them to Foot Power Sports, the one that Doug used to work for.
Yeah.
My first really good solid shop was still one of our shops, 35th Avenue Skates, which it's been in Des Moines and Kent. It was pretty close to Burton. A guy named Kyle Finn, who was, if he wasn't there, he's one of the guys that really helped me, too, because he was always he's the guy I would buy my skateboard wheels from when I was young. Yeah. And then years later, I was selling him snowboards.
That's epic.
To this day, he still has the shop. He's one of the only brick and mortars that's still around,
Yeah.
There was a shop called Gravity Sports down in Renton, and he really helped me out. He bought some early boards, and he paid for one of my first trade shows at the UW Hub Ballroom. It was on campus. It was skiing was so big back then, they had their own ski show. And he's like, hey, Mike, I'll pay for the show. You can display your boards. He was selling Dale boots, which is...
Damn, wow.
That's how the Craig Kelly bladder came into existence. You know what Dale boots are?
I know exactly what
He was the Dale boot distributor.
No way. What were they for before they were
they're just for skiing.
Stuff?
They're high-end ski. Well, I don't know if they're high-end. They're specialized kind of custom ski boots that nobody sold. Nobody retailed them. They're very...
Right.
I think they're from Utah or Colorado. But,
so
Dave, the skateboarder...
is what I know.
Dave was a skateboarder, but he loved to ski. He didn't sell skis. He just sold skateboards. and had a really nice skate. He still has a skate shop. He's still at it. And he's probably 70 now. I'm gonna get, or late 60s, I guess.
Come on.
But he had the Dale boots, right? He'd always show me, and I was a skier. He was a skier. He was quite, 7, 8 years older than me. So he was like, whoa, he's like Crystal Mountain skier. I'm a ski acre skier. He's a rich guy with a skate shop. I was a poor kid with no money. But he would buy skates from me, some of my handmade skates, and he would buy my early snowboards.
Wow.
And took me to the first show ever that he paid for it. And but what happened, how the whole industry took up that liner, I accidentally did that, because what happened is there was a Seattle ski show that year. They had a big Seattle ski show where they had the carpet, the big old magic carpet, where it was Jeff Page, who's the guy that started Inland Surfer many years later. Jeff Page had Jeff Page Ballet School, ski school. I'd always go down there to this big ski show and watch Jeff Page do his ballet on his skis, which was cool. I thought it was cool. Like, wow, he can do ballet on skis. But that particular year when snowboarding was just, when I was now doing it full time, and I think I had just started building the camber boards with steel edges and no fins. At that ski show that year, the DIN standard was passed for boots, where every ski retailer had to get rid of boots that didn't have a standard on them. So they had a big ski swap that had more boots than you've ever seen. When the show ended, I was there at the end of the show and thinking, hey, I didn't even have Sorels. I had Fred Meyer imitation Sorels that were only like $18 or $16.
I know the ones.
But they were rubber.
Yeah.
So they didn't leak like a Sorel would leak. There's no seams that could leak. So anyway, but I needed bladders, right? And so I hung around till the show was over and said, hey, can I get a deal on some bladders with boots that didn't sell? And the guys that were breaking down the show go, listen, everything that doesn't have a DIN standard, we can't sell it. No store can sell it now. So he goes, you can have all the boots here. You can have everything. Just take everything.
My God.
And my dad and a few buddies had just started a ski school. They figured out that we didn't have any money. I grew up without money. I was like on the free lunch program at school. My dad figured out, he was an old time skier and ski bum in Sun Valley. Talked to Dave Moffat, who ran Snoqualmie Pass, and Dave said, if you get 32 people together and bus them up here, we'll give you like 8 free instructor passes. So my dad went, we're starting a ski school, and our whole family can get instructor passes. And so anyway, they had a bus.
Wow.
And so tiny, it wasn't long. I said, can I borrow the bus? And we went down the next day after the ski show and loaded up the bus with ski boots. And anyway, the word got out about this time is when Dan Donnelly, I think ran Quip, Carter Turk, a bunch of people, I don't know, a bunch of the Baker guys and us had kind of hooked up. And I remember giving some bladders to Dano and some of Dano's friends, Grady Windsor and a guy named Jerry French. A bunch of people all came down and everyone was getting bladders. I can't remember who they all were, but anyway, all the big size bladders or, like whatever, like an adult male size bladders were gone instantly, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, Craig finally came. He's like, hey, got bladders? And I was like, oh, I'm out of anything that would work, And he was like kind of bummed, the only guy that just had Sorels with felt liners.
Wow.
And I knew Craig by then I'd met Craig a few times, and he's the guy like, ooh, that young fellow is showing a little more promise than most of them. And
he was still Sims at that point.
He had just got sponsored by Sims, yeah.
Yep.
Definitely still Sims.
Definitely.
Was not Burton yet.
Yeah.
Strongly Sims.
Yeah, felt boots, he's on Sims, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so I said, hey, Craig, I think he called me on the phone. Should I come down and get some? I go, I'm out. I go, I got an idea. I go, let me make a call. And I called Dave at Gravity, and I go, Dave, would you just sell bladders to this snowboarder named Craig Kelly? No one had heard of Craig Kelly. No one had heard of anybody yet.
Right.
Not even Kidwell, right? We've heard of Tom Sims.
Sure.
That was about it. A guy named Alan Arnbrister might be the only snowboarder anyone knew of back then. Probably no one knew of him either. He was a guy from Tahoe. But anyway.
Yeah, dude, I've met Alan, I think.
Yeah, he was in Sims promotional material back
Absolutely,
then.
yeah.
And so, but anyway, Craig gets hold of Dave Kramer, who owns Gravity, and gets a Dale boot liner. I remember at the time thinking, oh, it's so sad. He get the subpar bladder, because that bladder, looked kind of like neoprene, kind of. It's kind of a rubbery right? All of us have nice sewn European bladders, right, with a big tongue.
It was very simple, right?
Right. We got a big high back with.
It's just a wrap.
It's a wrap, and
there's no lacing. There's no
lacing.
Like it's.
And even Dave Kramer said, "Well, that's the beauty of Dale boot. That you stick your foot in, it doesn't fit the first time, and then you sand that rubber around the hot spots on your foot." He would. And that's why he was the certified Dale boot. I think the only guy in the Northwest that sold them, because he didn't sell anything else ski. But he's like, you gotta be a craftsman to reshape that bladder. So that's what Craig got. And we felt really bad for him. Like, and he had to pay money. Wow. He probably had to pay like $90 or something.
Oh,
right?
my God.
For a set of these. Snap to, a few years later,
the Burton
turns out
freestyle boot.
That's what they used. Because Craig's like, hey, I got the best bladder of anyone.
Right.
Because when we saw it hit the market years later, we're like, wait, that's like a second-rate Dale boot bladder they knocked off. It turns out everybody loved them.
It was a Dale boot liner, yeah. You know what? They were heavy as hell.
They were, because they were they were a foamed rubber, but not very foamed.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like
mostly rubber. I remember taking them out and looking at them. My friend had the Burton two tongues.
Yeah,
and I was so jealous because the way that the boot liner looked in the boot too, because I still had Sorels or whatever. I liked them. But that's because they were Burton thing. Like by the time they were a Burton thing, you wanted the Burton freestyle boot. You wanted the two-tone boot. You wanted that shit. Yeah. But then in Canada, very shortly after that, 92 or 93, Intuition's born.
Oh yeah.
And the first ones are essentially the same kind of Dale boot wrap, but the foam weighs nothing. It's a closed cell foam and it's heat moldable and it's epic.
It's cool.
It's epic. Yeah.
So do you have a lot of people that listen to this that are Canadians, obviously?
Tons, yeah.
Can I tell a little story that mixes hockey with the future of...
Fuck yeah, dude.
So how did our first binding come to be? GNU was famous for having probably the first binding on the market that everyone hated.
The gray one.
The gray one.
The gray one that
no one could get out of.
Pre-folding?
No folding.
No folding. Just
didn't fold.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know where we have one around here, but it's
thick.
the worst binding ever.
Thick on the bottom.
And heavy. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
How we came up with that is my partner Fred at the time, he said, hey, he was a hardcore water skier. Like I said, he was in Warren Miller films. He's like an Iron Man guy, right? He'd go to Jackson and do the Iron Man. We have to run to the top of the mountain. And then one year, you almost have to drop into Corbett's. One year there was no snow, low tide. Everyone had to rope down Corbett's. He's the only guy that jumped in.
Oh, God.
He had to clear all these rocks. And he said, everyone else is roping down. Like, if I want to win, I got to skate up to it and just clear all the rocks. But he's a gnarly dude, right?
That is so gnarly.
He's a gnarly dude, and he was a gnarly water skier. We taught him to surf. I taught him to shape surfboards. Really, he was my sister's boyfriend at the time, 7 years older. And he had a company called Seattle Display and Design. He built trade shows for the ski industry. So he knew the industry inside and out, and he wanted to join me in the business. And so I gave him half the business. After John Heine quit and went back to become a math major and ski race, then Fred's like, I asked him, you want to do it with me? And so he jumped in. And anyway, about a year into it, he's like, hey, we needed real bindings. Like, this wasn't going to cut it, the ones I was thermoforming myself.
Yeah.
And so he said, hey, he's a water skier. And he said, the guys at O'Brien are working on a new binding in Italy with a ski boot manufacturer. And he had just been put in touch with a company called Seattle Foot that was making carbon prosthetics for people with amputees with one leg.
Oh, wow.
And they just won an award for their artificial foot. And so that was the company working on this new binding for water skis. It was going to be it's going to look like a ski boot that goes on water skis. And so Seattle Foot, we met with them. Fred and I met with them. We didn't have any money, so it was like we had to pretend like we had access to a bank loan even.
Sure.
And so we're telling them what we want. And literally I brought them handmade prototypes of what I want it to be like, but they were this fancy company that had to show comps. For the next month, we'll make comps for you of pictures. And anyway, everything they made was these ornate pictures. They didn't want a simple folding high back. And so they're like, we're going to make it out of one piece. And anyway, the one we chose was the most simple one, which was still ridiculous. Some look gothic, like castles. They wanted it to look like something. The one we did looked like we called it potato chips down the side. It was still ugly, uglier than crap. But we were like, well, they must know something we don't know. But I had come up with the idea of the tongue by then, right?
We still call that the Craig Kelly tongue.
Well, because you know what happened, right? I ended up giving Craig years later. I'll tell you what happened there, because this is a hockey story. This is Canadian.
I love this.
So we fly to Italy, Fred and I. It's my first trip to Europe. I'd only flown once in my life. And I got youth fare back then, so it was cheap. Fred was like $400 for a ticket. Mine was like $150 because I was only like 21. And we cold called. This is how we found Paulet, actually. We cold called. We went to Olivieri. We were put in touch with them through Seattle Foot, who was doing this binding for O'Brien, which was going to be made at Olivieri. Well, when we meet Olivieri, I remember getting ready for it. Gwen Howitt. I was dating Gwen Howitt at the time. You know Gwen?
I do.
And who now is like, she's got a lot of stuff going on with Baker. Like she's got
she's
like
a GM, I think.
Oh, she's killing it.
Yeah.
She's got she flew down here during COVID and said, we got like 500 employees, and
it's insane.
And she was telling me what it's like, and I was like, what? Like, I didn't realize how. I mean, it's so big and so much, just liabilities and organization. And anyway, she's sharp, right?
Yeah.
So at the time, she was on crew at UW, and we were sponsoring Amy, and just had started sponsoring Amy. And anyway, she helped me. I go, hey, we're going to Italy, and eventually she started working for Windline too, as in marketing.
Oh, no way.
Like after she got out of college, but at the time she was in crew. And so she's like, come on, we're going to, I think it's called Bluebeard's, a place on the Ave at the UW. We're going to get you a suit. We're going to get you a suit, tie, and a button-up shirt, and da-da-da-da-da. And I was going, I think we need this, so we're going to Italy. Fred told me to do that. Fred, when I was looking, he was 7 years older. He had suits and everything.
Yeah.
I didn't own a suit. And he's like, you got to get something a little nicer. So she helped me. If she didn't help me, I would have been screwed. She dressed me. And
I love that.
So we get to Italy, and we meet. So we're two surfer dudes, meeting with this prominent giant factory. It turns out Olivieri at the time, it's called Icaro Olivieri, the name of the factory. We meet with them. There's 400 employees there. They make every ski boot buckle in the world was made there at the time. Virtually every ski boot mold for plastic ski boots was made there. The Olivieri brothers, Icaro Olivieri and Oliviero Olivieri, the younger brother, who we dealt with, and Icaro Olivieri, which was the name of the company, Icaro Olivieri, they invented the plastic ski boot buckle. During World War II, they used to rob. They'd go find all the old tank or trucks that were broken down from either side, and they said they made their money by stealing gas. They had no money, but eventually along the way, the two of them co-invented the plastic ski boot buckle.
Are we talking about this clasp thing,
like
the
didn't
Sims
exist before?
one? The Sims one,
not the bail buckle,
not the bail buckle,
but the plastic with a strap and
the precursor to like the ladder strap.
The ladder strap. They invented the ladder strap with a buckle.
Whoa,
that was their patent, and so that's where their money came from.
Damn,
they invented that, and so they virtually had the whole ski market after that. But they were geniuses, and they started building the machines that built the molds. So they started building molds for every ski boot factory in the world. Thus, almost every ski boot factory in the world, when we went to Montebelluna, within a short radius of that town, they're almost all in that town or near there. It's kind of cool.
That's wild.
There's a few, like Koflak, I think, was up in Austria, and Reichley was in Switzerland, but virtually every boot came out of Italy back then. Caver was there. I believe Lang was there. Well, they claim they made the first plastic ski boot in the world, too. Not only the buckle, they did patent the first plastic buckle, but when we went there, we were like, wait a second, a guy in Tacoma, Washington claims he made the first plastic ski boot in the world. His name's Ed Kriskovic, and because when I first met Mr. Olivieri, I'm all humbled wearing my suit, and in this fancy office, sparkling water, and crazy paintings on the wall, and they all had cigarettes going. Not Olivieri. He was like the only Italian that didn't smoke, which was another long story. Smart dude. He's like, the second he heard it's dangerous, he just quit cold turkey. He's like, last cigarette I'll ever have. But his wife would always come in lighting cigarettes, and all the people we dealt with were like rubbing their temples and smoking. And so Fred and I we're in there, and it turns out that one of the first things I said when we went to lunch that first day is like, hey, a guy. He's saying he invented, I knew he did the buckle, but he said he invented the plastic ski boot. I said, a guy named Ed Kriskovic in Tacoma claims he made the first plastic ski boot. And Mr. Olivieri goes, yeah, he actually did. The whole world thinks we did, but we did the buckle. He goes, it was actually made in Tacoma, Washington.
Are
I'm
you
like, what?
serious?
And it turns out it was a guy here. It's what became the Lang.
Yeah.
It was called the PK. Peter Kennedy, I believe. It was the PK. And then years later, my girlfriend at Baker in like 1990, Tracy McGuire, her mom was having a relationship with a guy named John Gletcher, an Austrian guy, super in shape mountain man. And I'd snowboard with them when they're skiing, and he's like, he was a machinist. He's like, I made the first plastic ski boot in the world. And I was thinking, what? Wait a second. I didn't want to say anything. So like, wait, Ed Kriskovic did it. And as I got to know this man, John Gletcher became a really good friend. He's like, I told him I thought it was a guy named Ed Kriskovic. He goes, that's who owned the company. I made the molds. And so, but I passed that all by Olivieri, and he's like, yeah, that's actually what happened. He's like, they made it first. We made the second plastic ski boot. So it became the Lang. The Lang was the first. It was the PK that became the Lang, first plastic ski boot.
I could see the
Lang. So the Olivieris, though, as I go in the factory, he gives us a factory tour, which I feel so lucky now. Guys from K2 and other companies that years later, figured out what we were doing and went into that or started working with Olivieri. They're like Jason Kasnitz, who used to ride for us, became the K2 engineer. Years later, I met him in the jungle, and many years later, I met him in Pavones in the jungle. He was waiting for a bus, and I was like, Jay, and we just started talking. But I was like, remember Olivieri? Because I turned him on to Olivieri years later when he was at K2. I said, if you go, we had no money many years later, and I said, I'll give you the formula to work with Olivieri. Whoa. If you come up with a binding, just sell it to us. I'll give you the formula. And so our first Lib Techs came with K2 bindings if you wanted them.
I'm trying to think of the era of K2 binding. I remember them.
Yeah,
they were
nice.
They
kind of looked like a Burton.
But
made by Olivieri, made it a little nicer.
Yeah.
Because Burton was buying their buckles from Olivieri. Arthur Sims, everyone was buying buckles from Olivieri. Yeah. I'd watch their buckle orders going out, and we were always giggling with Mr. Olivieri, like, they haven't figured out who you are yet, and we're not going to tell them. Kemper did figure it out. Jamie did. Jamie followed me to a meeting.
No.
Yeah.
How funny is
at
this
Olivieri,
guy?
I was at ISPO having cheese, wine, and little meats with Mr. Olivieri.
Yes, I love
and Jamie sat outside looking at me and goes, I know where you get your bindings. That's after he'd already made the appointment with me at Paulé.
Wow, man.
I was about to sign that deal with Paulé, to become one. And then Kemper came in, and Jamie said, I have like $2 million to spend. I had no money. At that point, Paulé was funding me on a handshake. I didn't have a contract.
That's incredible.
They made 18,000 boards for me on a handshake. The first year they did 5,500 on a handshake. Next year they did 18,000 on a handshake.
So what were your terms? They give you 90 days or something, or
pay when you can.
Pay when you can.
And but then Windline never paid us.
So you okay?
The next year.
And who the hell is Windline in this?
They're a
distributing kind
sailboard
of thing?
distributor. The ones that were the owner's dad and brother and sister were lawyers.
So were they middling for you guys?
Well, they signed a deal. They convinced Fred and I year 2 that this whole great thing was happening. So it's like 1987 or 88.
Yep.
Maybe 88. They convinced us, like, hey, because we only sold to them for just U.S., right?
Yeah.
And so Murray and Paul were Canada.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the world, we had distributors in every country.
Yeah.
But Windline, they said, hey, we could do a better job if you want to make it real easy. We can handle all your distributors, and we'll take care of it. We have a huge staff.
We'll go between you
and they go,
these deals
and then we'll collect the money and just give you a royalty. But I remember Fred, both of us were like, that sounds great. So wait, we just have to design.
We do nothing.
We design now and ride and test.
Yeah.
But anyway, they quit. They didn't pay us.
They didn't pay anyone. It sounds like.
Yeah, they didn't pay. After they started Nitro, they didn't pay Paulé, but they also didn't pay North Sales, and Fred sued them for the $400,000, and it was a no-brainer. It was a contract that showed they owed it to us.
Yeah, did he get anything?
Or did
he did.
No, he got nothing. That's how we got GNU back.
Right.
We let him have the GNU name. We were like, you can take it, and we shook hands. We were buds. So I said, you go after Windline, but and this is about the time we brought Pete into the business. He was working with us, and I gave him half of my stock in the business. My transmission went kerplunk.
I remember this story.
Yeah, coming down Mount Baker.
Yeah.
And it was snowing, and I called Pete, and I go, hey, it's going to take like a couple days, but it's going to be like $625. I go, how about it for fun? If you pay the bill, you can have half my shares. At the time, Randy, I'd basically given him 51% of the company for nothing. He didn't pay for it. And then I still had part of it left, and I gave Pete half of it. I used to say, hey, Randy, let's just give Pete like a third of the company. Yeah. And he was like, no. I was like, but you didn't really, like, he never put anything into the business. So kind of as a point, I was into punk rock, and I liked the hippie peace love thing and punk rock. So I was like, it was one of those things where, I definitely was one of those guys that was like, money doesn't matter. Yeah. Plus, we weren't making any money anyway.
I remember you telling me that you
didn't make any money anyway, but I didn't care about money.
During, like, once the business took off and there was some money there, that your girlfriend at the time looked around and said, well, you've got, pine shelving on milk crates here for your seats in your living room. Like, you have access to money.
I was living in a 750 square foot house.
Yeah.
With John Heine. We re-hooked up. He started working for Halliburton. He got a job, and he's awesome. Yeah. So we roomed for years in a 750 foot house. And then he got married and to one of his fellow workers there that he's still married to. And then Nick Russian, who's our famous artist that still works with us, he moved in with me. So me and Nick lived together for a while. And built a half pipe in the backyard. It was fun. I remember it was a 750 foot house. Yeah, I had
like there was money coming in, but that didn't it didn't change anything about your life because that wasn't what you were doing it for ever any other time.
What I called money coming in by other people's standards wasn't much money coming in.
Sure.
I grew up on the free lunch program at school where
right.
In junior high I got 10-cent lunches, and then in high school my mom said, I got good news. We just qualified in a lower bracket. Lunch is free now. And I went, that's the best thing ever. I was hungry. I was growing and hungry, and I played basketball. I wanted to be a pro hockey player, but I didn't get to play, so I was a basketball player, which is kind of hockey rules in sense. And and I was tall, so I was like, I like basketball. It's great. It was like pretending you're playing hockey. And but I needed food, and lunch was free. And this is another industry story. I haven't even got to the hockey part about Olivieri yet, but my first day of high school, there's a lot of intimidation. There's peer pressure. Even though I was like, I'm bigger than that. I don't feel any peer pressure, but just like you hear, there's peer. Anyway, all the rich kids were from Normandy Park. I lived on the other side of the tracks. And then we had kids from the projects too that were even like less, struggling more than us. But we were fine. I mean, me and my brother and sister had every toy we could want. My parents made sure that we always had great Christmases, and we raised our own money for things, but no shortage of toys. We got to go to the mountain. Like I said, my dad started a ski school so we could get free passes and got creative. But first day of school, I waited till the whole lunchroom, till everyone went through the lunch line, because I realized I'm kind of embarrassed. All these friends of mine, they might kind of giggle when they find out I'm getting free lunch. It's a little embarrassing. And so the lady, her name was Mrs. Nolan. I remember to this day. I'll never forget. I went up to her. There's 2 lunch lines, and I go, hey, they're supposed to pull out a card every day if you're getting a free one and look at it. And I don't even know if they stamp it, but they were supposed to. I go, she understood instantly. I go, can you remember me for the next 3 years? And she's like, uh-huh. I go, is it okay if we don't pull out the card? She's like, okay. Wow. And so for the next 3 years, I started in 10th grade. Back then the school was 10th through 12th. For the next 3 years, I went through that lunch line. And I get to the end with all these friends, some from Normandy Park, super wealthy. Their dads are all pilots and Boeing engineers, and they already have fancy Camaros. They have their own cars, and I just walk to school every day in the rain. And anyway, we walk through the line, and they all pay I think lunch is $1.10 for them or something. And then I get to Mrs. Nolan, and she does just give like a Mona Lisa smile to me. And they go like, dang, man. It's when Happy Days was on TV, Arthur Fonzarelli. They're like, you're like the Fonz, man. Like, and they never, I don't think they figured it out. I don't think they did. I mean, they're smart, but I think they thought I had something with Miss. They're like, you got something going there, because she just smiled at me. And then I made friends with Peggy Williams. She was one of the girls in the school that some people just weren't nice to her, right? And my mom and dad raised me and my brother and sister really well, right? Where we were the ones that knew to be, let's be nice to everyone. Everyone's cool, right? And so we were that person, right? I worked with ESL students. I was the one that worked with Laotian students and Cambodian students. And there was a bunch of them that were all refugees that were in the portables. They weren't even in our main buildings, and I intermingled with them. But anyway, I always had a great relationship with her, right? And so she was like, you know what? I'm trying to lose a little weight. She was the melt girl. They got a free lunch ticket every day. She goes, you can have my lunch ticket. Damn. So then I'd walk through and Mrs. Nolan would go, and I'd have 2 lunches every day. And then I made friends with the Cambodian, Laotian, and there was one South Korean guy named Kipak, but it was all the like Eastern Asian, our school's the school, you know, there was several hundred of them. I made friends with them, right? They were my buds. I loved them. I learned all the slang in their language. And sick. Anyway, so they had a free rice line. You get bottomless rice with chicken broth on it. So I'd go through, I'd get 2 lunches. Mrs. Nolan would nod to me. And then I'd walk over to their section with my 2 trays, and they'd pile all the rice with chicken broth on it. And then I'd a lot of times just sit with them. I'd sit with Kipak. I remember sitting with Kipak. He taught me how to whistle all these crazy ways and slang. And then, yeah, I mean, I had a guy named Vila, this Laotian guy that was, you know, that's just great. I'd sit with them, you know, and it was kind of fun. But anyway, Mrs. Nolan, like all of a sudden, 2 years later, when I was a senior, it's like, hey, my son, a year later, they started bringing freshmen in. She's like, my son, there weren't no skateboarders left other than Bruce Fogg at this point. Even Peter Feeling didn't skate, the guys that were a year older than me. Yeah. She goes, my son's a skateboarder. She knew I was a skateboarder because I'd carry my skates sometimes. I'd have skate shirts. Yeah. She goes, he just started here as a 9th grader and he's a skateboarder. And I told him that you build skateboards. And anyway, he was, I think, my first real customer. He bought several skateboards from me. That's incredible. Anyway, many years later, my first people I ever hired were Pete Sari and him, Rich Nolan. And they both came for a couple days. I was just showing them how I'm building the snowboards because John Honey wasn't around anymore. So this is like 85, 86. And anyway, Rich came, they both came 2 days and it was the weekend. Rich never came back. I gave him a board to show his friends and never came back. And he was the lunch woman's son. And then anyway, we're on great terms. So it was no problem. I'm the type of person that no grudge. It's like, I love the board. You could have it, whatever. Yeah. But Pete kept coming back. But Rich, years later, I kind of helped him out. I'd worked for Kidder designing what would be, this is like 1983 going into 84, what would be a wakeboard. We didn't have a name for it. Damn. A thing to stand sideways behind a boat. Yep. He wanted something when the lake gets roughed up. Yeah, I didn't have any money, so I didn't have a boat, but I used to build water skis in shop. I used to build like twin fin water skis and crazy water skis that I couldn't ride because I didn't have a boat. But that's amazing. So he hired me to shape something to stand sideways behind a boat, something around a 5.0 or a 5.3. He ordered a stack of Clark foam blanks, kneeboard Clark foam. They're for like kneeboard surfers, right? Yeah. They were the shortest blank they made. And I was shaping boards by then. Surfboards, 83, 84. I'd been shaping since 1980. 1980. And so I went, a guy named Brian Wiley. Wiley's water skis. It was a specialized water ski shop. I knew Darren and Brian Wiley.
Wiley's, yeah.
And Brian worked tight with Kidder, and he ran his dad's water ski shop, Wiley Water Skis. And he set me up. He's like, hey, Mike, Kidder's got like a whole stack of blanks, but he can't find a shaper anywhere in the Northwest. It's before the gorge was really going off yet in sailboarding, so there weren't really shapers anywhere. I was a young kid. And so he hired me, and he said, let's invent something to ride behind a boat when it gets chopped up. And so he gave me a guy named, his head marketer, Mike Kirschenbaum. He's like, because he asked me, do you have a boat to test with? You know, probably thinking everyone has a boat. I'm like, no. Like, I grew up on the free lunch program. But Mike Kirschenbaum, who's was his head marketing guy, is like, hey, I live on Lake Tapps. Like, every time you get one done, just let me know. And I started out working at the factory in this little garage room he had with his collector car, like some old Chevy that was a collector's car. And I remember the first day I shaped, the dust covered it. And anyway, basically he's like, it's okay if you work out of your house. So I literally worked outside. Everyone thought I had a garage shop. I didn't have a garage.
You just would work.
I worked outside in the grass, and the old leaves. But I built him a year's worth of prototypes Number one was a twin. Do you surf at all?
No.
Anyway,
really.
it was a twin. Number one had fins on it, right? A twin fin.
Yep. Yeah. So
and he saw it and he goes,
like a thruster.
He goes, why fins?
Yeah.
Right? He's like, we want to build a rotomold, the real one, so I want no fins. So I had to spend the next year, nothing else could have fins. And I'm like, wait, I can't have fins? I go, you want me to come with something I can carve and with no fins? At the time, I thought that wouldn't work.
Right.
And then Mike Kirschenbaum showed me a trick ski.
Yep.
Trick water skiing exists at the time. And he showed me a trick ski that has no fins, and he's just laying down these carves on this little short. It basically looks like a wake board nowadays. Looks like a big trick ski. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
and you realize you can carve without fins. So I came up with something that would work without fins. Had a really fairly deep swallowtail, these really sharp rails on it. They were really cool. But he wanted me to also put a big concave pad, so you could knee board it if you wanted to. So anyway,
he was trying for too much. Yeah.
I got like almost a year into it, and that's when he's like, "Yeah, I don't think it's going to go anywhere."
Yeah.
And
that's too early. Anyways.
Tony Finn came out with the Scurfer
is,
a year or two later.
And so
I don't know if you know Tony.
Yeah. I mean, I know of him. I know
super
his
good
reputation. So Paul.
He looks like Eddie Vedder.
Yeah. So Paul O'Brien, Herb's son.
Yeah, Ronix.
At one point, Paul. There's one of the stories that's just in my lexicon is that during the kneeboard time,
brand called Hydroslide.
Tunnel
and Hydroslide, two brands were on the market back then.
That's crazy. Yeah. I remember
you could stand on the Hydroslides. They look like a surf kneeboard.
Yeah.
And people were trying to stand on those.
Yeah, we were wrapping the kneeboard strap around our front foot to try and have more. Right. We were standing on them and trying to have more control. It didn't really work. It was like you're probably going to get hurt, actually.
Right.
And actually, even early wakeboard bindings destroyed people. Like folded their feet.
Oh yeah,
it was the worst. Murray's done it, and another guy, Neil from our.
Have you heard of Jimmy Redmond?
No.
So Tony Finn came out with Scurfer, which changed everything. Did a great job. There's old footage of him. There's someone did a movie about it. You see the old footage. I was like, he was insane. They're riding really fast speeds. They're riding closer to water ski speeds.
Yes.
He's killing it. But he looks like Eddie Vedder. I was like, he looks just like Eddie. And anyway, and then a guy after him, just right around the same time, a guy from Texas, I believe, named Jimmy Redmond. That one out done too.
Almost.
I might have to pop the Flojoy. Flojoy. I'm gonna pee.
All right, more to come next week. FNRad shoutouts to Mike and his wife Dina, the Mervin crew. It was super sick to meet Poss and the boys at the factory. Thank you Pete Sorry, Paul Farrell, Barrett Christie, Jesse Burtner, and several others for helping me time this trip to catch Mike. I can't thank Mike enough for sitting down and talking about his life in snowboarding. He's truly one of the great icons of our history. Special thanks this week to Evan Cole from Burton, who got FNRad back on the Anon program with Burton. Love and respect. All you listeners, be sure to come back next week for more FNRad snowboarding presented by Flojoy Water and brought to you by FNRad Productions.